Good evening. Are we all ready? Sorry, I perhaps should have just pre-warned you. Sorry, members. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting. Are we okay? Right. I'll start for the third time. Good evening and welcome to this Western Area Planning meeting this evening of the 20th of November. I'm Councillor Phil Barnett, Chairman of Western Area Planning Committee. I'm ably assisted tonight by various other members of the committee. My Vice Chairman, Councillor Clive Hooker. Councillor Adrian Abbs is not present at the moment, but I believe he's stuck on the A34 in an accident at the moment. Hopefully he will be with us at some stage. Also present, Councillor Anthony Amos-Raj, Councillor Paul Dick, Councillor Nigel Foote, and Councillor Denise Gaines, Councillor Tony Vickers, along with Councillor Howard Williston. Good evening to you all. And also this evening, we are ably assisted by the various officers. To my right, the team leader of Development Control, Deborah Inston, Michael Butler, lead, our Principal Planning Officer at the over towards my right. Okay, Michael. Next door to Michael is Principal Planning Officer Jake Brown. I'm also assisted by Annabelle Munro, the legal advisor. Also to the rear, sorry, I've omitted you first time around, Paul Goddard, the team leader at Highways Development Control. We're also got the clerk, Stephen Chard, to my left, who will be taking notes of the meeting, and we're assisted by Sam Chilverton, the Zoom host, to my rear on the left. Before we start this evening's meeting, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind members that we are subject to the Council's Code of Conduct, which requires us to uphold certain standards, including, importantly, respect. Members across the chamber may not always agree with one another, but I would ask that in our disagreements, we endeavour to always be respectful of other views. Tonight, of course, we must make sure that you are aware of the evacuation procedure, especially for members of the public who perhaps are not totally aware of the access routes of this council chamber. If we do hear the emergency evacuation alarm, we must obviously leave this room immediately, leave the building through the recognised fire exit routes, and proceed to a safe emergency position, which in this case is outside the assembly point in the car park of the Dolphin pub. Nevertheless, if the lockdown alarm sounds, we must remain seated and await instruction from officers. We will then adjourn the meeting until such a time it's safe to proceed. At this point, do members have any questions in the way that the meeting will be conducted before I proceed? Nods of heads, I see. Okay, I will proceed. Firstly, hand over to you, Stephen, but I think I've already identified there's no apologies. So
correct, Jim. Yeah, only Councillor Abbs, who's you say held up on the A34.
Thank you very much. Members, now moving on to item 2, and I'm going to obviously invite you to make any observations or propose the minutes of the 18th of September. Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I've got 3 sort of minor queries about the minutes on pages 12, 13 and 16. On page 12, where it says under 32, the second to last bullet, that the second floor would be storage. I'm not sure that was correct, but I haven't actually got round to checking the plans. But more important, on the next page, second bullet, para 35, I think we were talking about referring it to the district planning committee rather than deferring. And then on page 17, I don't think the roads in para 51 that I was talking about were unstable, but they might have been unsuitable. Hopefully they're not unstable.
Does other members recall these points which Councillor Vickers is pointing out? Do you recall any?
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Vickers is correct in that it should be referred to rather than deferred. So that should be a correction.
Okay, so that's definitely a correction. What about the other
In
points?
terms of the storage space, it was the penultimate bullet point, isn't it, Councillor Vickers, on 32?
Yeah,
paragraph
talking about
32?
the second floor being used for storage space. It just struck me, you don't normally have storage space on the second floor, but
No, we can check that.
could check
We can
the-
check that for you,
Yeah, yeah.
Councillor, and we can amend accordingly.
You're happy with that, Councillor Vickers?
yes,
Okay.
please, yeah, that's fine.
And
I'm happy to propose the
with those
accepting
amendments,
the minutes with those minor changes.
can I have a second? Right, Councillor Gaines, you second
Happy to
it.
second that, Chairman.
Okay, all those in favour, please show. Abstentions, obviously, some of us weren't present that this evening. Okay, did you get this? Okay, thank you. Okay, members, moving on then to item 3, declarations of interest, and perhaps I can go around the table. Councillor Amathraj.
Thank you, Chairman. Apart from the first application, which I'm a board member as well, I called it in. I was lobbied by the neighboring property owner, but I will keep my mind open in terms of participating in the debate and the vote and listen to all the arguments. But yeah, apart from that, there is nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Gaines.
No, Chairman, I haven't been lobbied on any of the applications this evening.
Councillor Foote. Councillor Vickers.
Just the standard one that when there are applications in the North Wessex Downs, as I'm the vice chair of the North Wessex Downs Councillor Partners, but don't believe I've got any conflict, but just something I should declare.
Councillor Williston.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Councillor Hooker.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Dick.
Nothing to declare, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, and from the chair, obviously on item 4, brackets 2, Premier Inn, Pinchington Lane, that is in the ward I represent. And I'm also a member of Greenham Parish Council where this application was discussed, but I was not present at that meeting when it was discussed. Okay. Now, moving on to agenda item 4, brackets 1. But before we specifically discuss this particular item, I'd like to just point out to members of the public that are perhaps new to this meeting, the procedure. I think it's appropriate that I just point out the way that we conduct the proceedings. Officers obviously will present the application to the committee, after which the following groups might wish to make representations for a maximum of 5 minutes each. Firstly, a representative from the parish or the town council where it's appropriate, the objectors, supporters, the applicant or the agent, and the agent, if it's the case, a joint presentation, and then the ward members. The committee members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of clarification of the speakers, and members will then have the opportunity to ask questions of officers. The committee will then debate the item before determining the application. Moving on to the first item, as I've already identified, it is application 24/01755/FUL, land adjacent to Twistle Cottage, Long Lane, Shaw. I now invite Michael Butler to present his presentation. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. So as you can see from the slide, this is land at Twistle Cottage in Shore Long Lane. And the proposal is for change of use of land to a mixed agricultural and residential use with the remodelling of levels on the land and the erection of an agricultural store. And the reason this come to committee was because the local ward member, as I think he's mentioned, has called the application in if the officer recommendation was to approve, which it is. Playing the page. Oh yeah, sorry, can't hear me very well. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Is that better, Mrs. Vickers? Is that okay? Can you hear now? Sorry.
I'll speak up because I've got a soft voice. I don't want to shout though, but there you go. So the purpose of this report is to consider the proposed development. The development is in the red line as on the location plan there. And as I mentioned before, the application seeks planning permission for the change of use of land, which currently has what I would say an abandoned non-use because it's former railway land, to a mixed agricultural ancillary and ancillary residential use. We would say in planning terms, the use has actually been abandoned. So it has there is a phrase called nil use in planning terms, and I would suggest that currently it has a nil use. If the committee elect to approve the application tonight, assuming you accept all the conditions that are recommended, the use of the land would be tied to Twistle Cottage, who are the applicants and are also the owners, but it would be tied functionally to the occupants of that particular dwelling. I'll just run through the application slides just to give you an idea of what's going to be proposed. There is a very dilapidated stables to the south of the application site. My cursor just here. And it's proposed that they're demolished and this small agricultural store in its place to replace that. It's very modest and very similar in size and footprint. This is the existing and proposed site plan, and you can see the red line there. To the northeast of the application site lies a private road. And for those of you who did the site visit, there's an existing bridge deck there, which was, of course, was a part of the former railway line. That's to remain, but there is proposed to be, you can see from the plan here, immediately I'm not going to say right, to the southeast of the bridge deck, would be for vehicle access and a small hard standing and turning area, which is the dark grey area you can see there. As mentioned before, the rest of the land will be planted up and remodelled and landscaped. Just so the committee are aware, the whole site is outside any defined settlement boundary, but in fact, the whole of the built-up area in Long Lane Shore is in the countryside in policy terms, so there's no difference there. In terms of planning history, an agricultural dwelling was refused and dismissed at appeal in 1975. And the loose boxes and stables I mentioned were approved in 1991. Just quickly going through the slides before I do the rest of my presentation, if I may. That's a photo of the private access leading up to the bridge deck with Twistle Cottage on the right. Another one of the road track going under the bridge deck. That's a photo of the proposed access point. Obviously, there's no access point at the moment. And again, that's an existing opening, but it's not used, to the west of the bridge deck. This is a photo of the stables. Stables to be demolished, as I mentioned. This is a better photo of the towards the north, towards the bridge. So you're looking from the site towards the north. So you can see there's quite a gradation of levels, gradient, and an overall view of the site there. I won't go through the consultations in any detail because they're set out in the report. But in terms of the statutory consultees, there are no objections at all. So the archaeologist, the drainage officer, the tree officer, the ecologist, environmental health and highways are all recommending no objections or indeed conditional permission. In terms of public representations, we have received 2 objections and 2 supporters at the time of writing the report. And if I refer you to the update sheet quickly, since writing the report, we've received 1 additional letter from, I don't actually know whether he is a local resident, but he uses the road. And he is concerned that if this application proceeds, there could be a difficulty with the structural integrity of the bridge deck. In terms of planning policy, the development needs to be considered under policy C8 in the HSA DPD, which relates to applications for the extension of residential curtilages in the countryside. I would say I know the proposal is actually for a mixed use, but officers consider that given that at least part of the use is to be residential curtilage, it was appropriate to assess it against policy C8. I won't go through the report because I'm sure you've read it, but in 6.6 to 6.12, all the reasons why officers consider this development accords with policy C8 are set out there. I'm happy to mention and answer any questions on that if you wish. Ecology and trees have no objections to the application. They are happy with it. In terms of other issues, I will go through this in a bit more detail because I think it's relevant. The apparent reason for the committee call-in notes that the land is being developed into a car park. That is not correct. Only a small portion will be on the northern perimeter. About 95% of the land will in fact remain as residential and mixed agricultural curtilage. Secondly, the matter about the structural integrity of the bridge deck is obviously a valid consideration, but it is specifically a civil issue, not a planning issue, because the ownership and the road that runs under the bridge is not adopted public highway. Therefore, the committee in planning terms do not need to consider that issue. Thirdly, just because the application lies outside a settlement boundary does not mean no future development can occur. And obviously the committee will know that many times planning permissions are granted for various developments where they form exceptions in the countryside. Fourthly, another objector has raised issues over the easements and deeds pertaining to the site, which they do. I've checked on the land registry and there are a number of easements and so on. Again, they're civil matters and not planning matters. But the planning permission does not override those easements. Again, it's a civil matter. There's some potential confusion over the actual description of the application. Mixed uses in some circumstances can become sui generis uses in certain occasions, i.e. use class of its own, but officers consider in this case that a mixed use on its own was an appropriate description of the development before you. Before I come on to the planning balance, I'd just like to mention a few things on the update sheet. We are recommending 2 additional conditions if you approve the application. One is that no development should take place until there's a cross-section on the long north-south axis of the development to ensure the gradients are appropriate, because there have been some concerns about potential overlooking, I believe. And secondly, the application site as approved shall only be used in conjunction with the occupants of Twistle Cottage. So if, for example, the present owners leave, the next occupants of Twistle Cottage will have that curtilage linked in. I haven't shown it on the plans, but we have received an additional location plan identifying Twistle Cottage in the blue land, which means it's in the same ownership. And therefore, in the planning balance and conclusion, officers consider this application has in fact much to commend it. It will bring into beneficial use an unattractive parcel of land. I haven't mentioned, but it's actually surrounded anyway by existing residential curtilages. And we consider it is acceptable, subject to the conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Michael. Paul, do you have anything to add at this stage?
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. Highway officers raised no objection to this proposal. The proposal is for use by the applicant themselves, and they are likely to be the only person attending the site, and therefore their vehicle only will likely to be attending the site, and therefore any vehicle movements associated with the proposal will be very low, and therefore on that basis we raise no objection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no representation from Shore Parish Council, so the next person is Julie Cooper, speaking as an objector. So I call upon you, Julie, to come to the lectern. You've got 5 minutes, and I will, or at least the timekeeper will notify you after 4 minutes, if that's okay.
Very short, actually. The reason for our objection really is about the ground levels. We would like them reduced in line with our garden to retain our privacy for our family and also for the people that I care for. So in fact, from that, neither gardens would be overlooked, mine or Twistle Cottage, which I think is quite fair. Our property is surrounded by open countryside from all over the land, and bearing that in mind, the fencing that I know hasn't been mentioned in much detail, in keeping with that, we would like to see something like a rural hazel fence to blend in, and of course that is eco-friendly as well, and subtle in appearance for the countryside. Also, we would like to make sure within that fencing that our gate is retained at the bottom of that development. Now, we're slightly confused with the hard standing. The beginning of the application stated 1 car. When we had the committee visit, the planning officer stated 2 cars. But now I see on the updated report that it states parking not required, as there is already parking within the curtilage of Twistle Cottage. And this was one of our main concerns, was the parking there. If this is the case and it's just for deliveries during the day, then that wouldn't be a problem to us at all. Because it wouldn't be the early mornings or the late evenings, which we would have had an issue with the people we care for. Finally, the access of leaving the land. To leave that land, you have got to be halfway out in the road to see under the bridge with traffic coming up. Because as soon as you go under the bridge, you've got a slight bend to the left. Now, just from our property and our neighbouring property, there are in excess of 30 movements of vehicles a day. The reason for that being so high is because the people that I care for, a lot of them go to daily activities. And I have my daughter and her partner there as well, with them going in and out. And that doesn't include, as I say, any visitors or any deliveries. And that's our concerns.
Okay, completed his
Okay.
presentation. What? Please stand there. There might be some questions from members.
Sorry.
Members, yes, Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, thank you. I should have said I possibly should have declared an interest here because I do share a house with the ward member, and sometimes she asks me my opinion on planning matters. So not been directly lobbied, but I've been involved. what you said, a couple of questions arising out of that. You talked about the change in levels and you've seen there's a new condition on that. But you also, we saw on the site visit that there's a need for screening, which wasn't there before. And is that what you're referring to when you talked about the type of fence that you want, which would be ecologically friendly? That's the first question. Would you like to see a proper screen fence? Because at the moment, I think it's only a post and rail facing your property on the
Yes,
plans.
yes, we would, obviously.
Okay. And the other question was about, you've referred to a gate. Why have you got a gate into the adjoining property in that fence? Why do you need to keep that?
Because we have access into that land.
I see. What, you mean the land further down, which is still agricultural, this mixed use? Because remember, it's part curtilage, part agricultural.
No, it's
so-
the whole of the land.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've heard what the officer said about that, but I'll ask the officer whether that might be something that could be conditioned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, councillor Williston and then councillor Hooker.
I know.
More questions?
Oh, sorry. It's all right to leave the microphone on. I've been switching it on and off, but I haven't heard any feedback. Can I just leave it on?
Hello, thank
Hello.
you for your presentation. You mentioned the people that you care for. I wonder whether you might like to expand on that a little bit.
Yes, I care for people through Shared Lives with West Berkshire. And they are people with disabilities, various scales. I do daycare support, I do respite, and I now have somebody staying full-time as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions at all? You can now be relieved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, I now call upon Gareth Jones, the agent. And again, 5 minutes, and do you want notification after 4 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening. This application seeks the change of use of land to mixed-use ancillary residential and agriculture, as well as permission for the replacement store and the levelling of land. I note that several members of the community have raised concerns with the proposal and welcome the opportunity to discuss these with you this evening. The site is a patch of land which is directly associated with the adjoining residential property of Twistle Cottage. The statement of truth submitted with the application infers how the site was historically used for ancillary residential purposes by the previous occupiers. Since purchasing the site, the applicants continued to use it for ancillary residential purposes and did not realise that they required permission for the works undertaken to date. Following correspondence with the council, the applicant sought to prepare a comprehensive planning application to address the situation. The proposal seeks to introduce a mixed-use agricultural element to the proposal, as this helps bring the proposal more in line with the rural surroundings. The levelling of the land is required as part of this in order to allow them to utilise machinery as part of their proposed activities. In relation to the ancillary residential element, policy C8 allows for the extension of residential curtilages, subject to accordance with a number of requirements. The proposal is considered to accord with these and both protects the countryside character of the area, as well as bringing an underutilised portion of land back into an active use. The restriction of PD rights by condition in the event this application is granted permission further controls the built form on the site beyond what is proposed as part of this application to the benefit of the site's countryside character. Hard standing, brick piers and gates are proposed to be controlled as part of, by condition in the event of a grant of planning permission, ensuring the council have control over the design and detail of how these will be brought forward. The applicant wants to ensure a high quality development is brought forward on the site that will be reflected in the architectural detail and vernacular of these features. Concerns have been raised with regard to the impact on amenity. The site is well screened by boundary features, such as trees and other landscaping features. and these can be further supplemented by condition in the event of a grant of planning permission. A construction method statement is proposed to be controlled by condition, further protecting neighbours by controlling factors such as hours of work, wheel washing, facilities and others, ensuring the works can be carried out without detriment to the amenity of the local community. When the development is complete, the proposal itself will be small scale in terms of intensity and will not have any harmful impact on neighbours going forward. Further to this, the Highways Department have raised no objection. The proposed application achieves over a 10% biodiversity net gain, which is considered to carry significant weight in the overall planning balance. Given the partially retrospective nature of the development, the applicant could have not provided any biodiversity net gain under the exemptions that exist in national policy. However, they wanted to include this as part of setting things right as part of a comprehensive planning application. A number of comments have been raised with regard to easements and covenants. It is important to note that these are not material planning considerations and as such do not form part of the decision-making process. These can be dealt with by the applicant and other parties outside of the planning system. I would like to conclude by thanking officers for their hard work throughout the application and thank them for the report this evening. I hope the committee is reassured by these comments. The proposed scheme represents a high quality development, bringing an underutilised section of land back into an active use that is more in keeping with the countryside character of the locality. I would therefore request that you support your officer's recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions to Mr Jones? Okay, Councillor Vickers first and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Mr Jones. Just you referred to the fact that the site is well screened around all the boundaries. Well, there's one part of it that was well screened but no longer is, which is how I think the neighbour first brought the matter to the attention of ward members. And we saw on the site visit that it is now quite open from one garden to the other. But as I said, there's not at the moment anything in the plans to show that will be reinstated, that screening. Do you think your client would be up for perhaps providing the sort of screening that the neighbour suggested rather than the post and rail fence?
Yeah, I think they would be happy with sort of additional screening measures.
Well, I'll raise that with the officers afterwards because we are supposed to only make a decision on the plans in front of us. But I think we've all heard. Thank you for that. And the other matter we've heard is not a planning matter. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for this presentation. Just two questions on your speech. First one, you mentioned ancillary residents. Can you please elaborate on this one? Because this is the part where even the parish council had some questions and including myself as ward member when we visited, like we had questions. What kind of ancillary residents that would be, and would there be new residents or they're part of the Thistle Cottage? And then you mentioned about the missionary. I could see only one place where the missionary part is mentioned in this report, that is for the storage. Is it right that it's going to be just for storage, or is going to be any activity with noise levels? Like, is it an agricultural missionary we are talking about, or is something? Can you elaborate on this one? Because it's a bit unclear, because just one place it's mentioned and you just
of course. So on your first question, in relation to the sort of ancillary residential activities, as you've seen from the update report, obviously it would relate to ancillary residential activities that of the residents of a Thistle Cottage. So with it being a mixed use agricultural sort of ancillary residential planning unit, they would use it as sort of, I guess, in effect, garden sort of site of sort of garden sort of an expansion to the wider curtilage, as the officers detailed within their report as well. And in relation to the machinery, sorry, I'm just sort of it would be more so for say a sit-on lawnmower or something like that. It wouldn't be anything extensive.
The foot.
Thanks very much, Chair. Mr. Jones, can I ask about the construction method statement and the hours of working? Because we've heard from Mrs. Cooper that obviously, she has, I suppose one could say, vulnerable residents that she's looking after. And I note the hours of work in the plan are 7:30 in the morning to 6 p.m. Mondays to Fridays, 8:30 to 1 on Saturdays. Could I ask, have you liaised with Mrs. Cooper, the neighbour, to sort of see if those hours of working are gonna work for her, if I can put it like that,
Yeah.
with her residents?
So, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the times that are proposed in that construction method statement were proposed by the Highways Department as part of the proposed construction method condition. I mean, it is for the committee to obviously have those conversations as to whether those times do need to be, amended. I mean, as I said, in terms of, well, just to clarify again, by hours of work, I mean, in terms of bringing this development forward, it's not going to be an employment generating use or anything like that. Yeah.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. You mentioned there that it would be lawn mowers and what have you. I thought on the site meeting we were talking about some ground levelling and earth moving.
Sorry, just sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off then. If you hadn't finished, what I meant, we mean more by that is that in terms of the ground levelling, that would take place, say, if this development is approved. The lawnmower, sort of sit-on lawnmower, would be when it is, the development is complete, if that makes sense.
Any other further questions at all? No. Okay, you can be relieved.
Thank you.
Okay, I now call upon the ward members. I'm not certain, is it Councillor Martha Vickers? Are you going to be the speaker? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Well, I wasn't certain whether it was a
Sorry.
joint presentation or not. That's all.
No, it turned itself off again. Sorry. Yes, I'm just speaking in support, as Anthony is serving on the committee today. Okay, so I'm here supporting the Mrs. Cooper. I will be very brief also, and I will be emphasising some of the issues that have already been raised. So thank you. This matter was brought to my attention by Julie Cooper, who you already heard from, who with their family lives in Sandy Lodge, the property to the east of the railway and adjacent to the proposed extension. And you'll have seen at the site visit that there's been a massive amount of earth moving, which has led to an invasion of the privacy of Julie and her family. And as you've heard, this is particularly concerning because of the nature of John and Julie Cooper's work. As you've heard, they are part of the council's shared life scheme, whereby families share their homes with adults with learning disabilities. This is extremely valuable work, and I'm sure you'll appreciate that it's particularly important that the screening, which I believe has been discussed, be reinstated to ensure the privacy of this family and to protect the well-being of their vulnerable guests. Those are the points that I wish to emphasise, as I think that's the most important issue here. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Any questions for Councillor Martha Vickers, members? No. It looks as if you've got off lightly, Councillor Vickers. Right. We now move on to members' questions of officers, and Councillor Willison's got his hand up first. Is it for Mr. Goddard or is it Mr. Butler?
Could be either, to be honest, Chairman.
Okay, right.
I'm just slightly confused by the red line around the main part of the site and the access road from Long Lane, which looks as if it's owned by the applicants. So is there a right of way across that to Sandymead House and the other properties, or is it wrong?
Yeah, in any red line application site where there's a change of use of land or any developments, if that development isn't immediately accessible by the public highway, it's standard best practice to have the red line from the application site to the public highway, which is what this does. The presence of the red line there doesn't mean that the applicant owns that land. And if he doesn't, he would have served notice on the relevant owners. But it means that he or she has a legal right of access over that to the public highway. That's all it means.
That was my second question in that case. There is definitely a legal right of way, sir.
Well, that's what we understand, yeah. I mean, the planning authority can't check every legal right of way in the district. We have to take some of this as
Pretty
accepted.
crucial to this site, to be honest.
It's crucial for many sites, councillor. I accept that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right, councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to those who've spoken hitherto. The issue for me, obviously, is this issue of screening, and I'm just going to, obviously, some concerns, major concerns of weight can be dealt with by condition. I'm just a little bit confused or unclear about what could or should be done in terms of screening, and I'm particularly thinking about near. If you stood in the property we're talking about near the bridge or what's left of the bridge, and you're looking at the farmhouse, I think there's been quite a lot of change there. I think that's the area where we're talking about for screening. I wonder what the officer could suggest that would be sensible and in keeping with the application.
Michael?
In one sense, to avoid any overlooking, the committee could condition that the relevant boundary, which is on the eastern boundary with Sandymead, should be, for example, a close bordered fence. I would say that would, however, be entirely inappropriate in this countryside location. So you need to make a choice. What I will say, and I hope the objectors don't take this the wrong way, but the current use of Sandymead House could at any time change over time. It is not a land use that will automatically remain. So you do need to take that into account. It could revert to, quote, a normal residential dwelling where the sensitivities of overlooking are not so sensitive. So you do need to also bear that in mind. I'm not belittling the objection in any way, but that is a relevant land use planning matter.
Councillor Hooker.
Thank you, Chairman. Two questions for Mr. Butler and one for Mr. Goddard, if I may. Mr. Butler, just for the benefit of the committee, could you explain the weight or relevance, if any, of, in planning terms, of the use or of the guests or the residents in that house? Is that something that's been put as an objection? Is that a planning issue, please?
Overlooking is a planning issue, but the particular sensitivities in this case, for the reasons I've just said, are not a planning issue because, with all due respect to the objectors, the planning authority doesn't control ownership, and the site, for all we know, could cease the use tomorrow. The site could be sold tomorrow. We do not control ownership. So the particular sensitivities are not necessarily going to be there permanently. They may only be there for the next 2 months. So you do need to bear that in mind.
Thank you. And the second question, not to overcomplicate this construction if it's passed tonight, but considering the size of the site and, as we've seen, the amount of earth maybe need to be moved, is there a requirement here, in your opinion, of a construction management plan? Wheel washing, hours of work, dust control, vehicle movements on such a small lane? Just your opinion, please.
I think to have a CMS is entirely inappropriate for this particular development because clearly remodelling of the site will involve, for a short period, potentially heavy machinery on the site. So a CMS is definitely required.
Is that in the condition at the moment, please?
It is, yeah. It's a CMS condition.
And the question to Mr. Goddard was one of splay lines. You obviously no objection, but when we were on the site, obviously you pull out and then on your left-hand side, you've got the bridge wall. You're quite happy with the splay lines when you pull out of that junction?
Chairman, the sight lines are very limited. We've assessed the proposal that the number of vehicle movements is very low for the proposal. And yes, the lane, as we've mentioned, is already used by Sandy Mead. And even with what Mrs. Cooper mentioned, the number of vehicle movements on the lane is also very low for that. And therefore, yes, the sightlines are limited, but in the end, the litmus test is always what could or couldn't be defended if the planning application went to appeal. And we are of the view, because of the very low vehicle movements all round, that we probably wouldn't sustain an objection. And on that basis, we recommended approval.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, right, councillor Amath-Raj.
Actually, Mr. Goddard's just answered my question anyway, so I'm.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of questions to the planning officer. Mr. Butler, page 43, net diversity gain. I think maybe I'm wrong. I assume that I'm wrong. It says page 42 and 43, the application was planning permission was made before 12th February 2024. And specifically, it says the exception for the net gain is made under the assumption that it's made under 12th February 2024. Am I understanding that it's this application you're suggesting that was made before 12th February, or is it something else? Because certainly this application was made in October, November, so we are discussing in November. So that page or the points is really need to be clarified. And I have a couple of other questions, but I'll follow up on this.
Did you want, thank you, councillor Mithraj. The exemption is because it's retrospective, and at the moment with BNG, retrospective applications are exempt. I know the government are looking into this at the moment to change that, but that's why it was exempt.
Sorry,
rather than
even if it is retrospective, where are we getting this 12th February? So are we assuming that the application they would have made before 12th February?
No, the application, I haven't got the date when it was valid, but I'm assuming it was validated after the 12th of February, but the exemption is because it's a retrospective application. But regardless, they are still proposing I think was it 10.2% net gain, biodiversity net gain on the application, which we've then conditioned as well accordingly.
Okay, thank you for that, Deborah. Follow-up questions on from my side. I'll just go back to the issue about the covenant, restrictive covenant. Although, Mr. Butler, you mentioned that these are civil matters. But this is not the first time we are asking this question in this Western Planning Area meeting, because I've seen number of times where we looked at number of applications where there are potential civil matter, legal issues. And hypothetically, if this is developed and given permission, and where are the residents occupying this land, would that covenant, restrictive covenant, impede the well-being of both sides? And if there will be a civil matter, would some of the planning terms we agree on, or if we approve on, would that change?
Thank you, councillor Mithraj. In terms of planning, in terms of covenants on properties, as Michael Butler pointed out, that planning doesn't override those covenants. So whilst planning permission can be granted, there may be aspects of that consent that may not, that may not be able to be carried out because there's still civil legal matters that need to be addressed. It's just one of many. Same way with building control, with building regulation consent. You get planning permission, but it doesn't mean to say you can build build until you get another consent. It's just a different. It's just one of many different layers of restrictions and consents that. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It kind of answers that question, but to suggest that there should not be no weightage given to that one is I'm slightly not able to understand that, because we've given we shouldn't compare two applications, they are separate, but the same committee has given weightage to the potential legal issues or civil matters, but I'll leave it at that stage. So you clarify my point. One question, Chairman, on the well-being of the current residents of the Sandymead. I just wanted to clarify the point that I give Mr. Butler and Ms. Inston that West Berkshire and their Share Life scheme, they've sent a letter to Mrs. Cooper on the 24th of September suggesting that the due consideration to the well-being of the residents have to be given, the noise and all this stuff, because they care for those residents. And I'm particular about the contents in this report, which suggest the same. So my question is very simple, that have you considered, although you answered before, Mr. Butler, it could change any time, but for today's consideration, have you considered the letter by the West Berkshire officer, Shared Lives Matter, that the well-being of the residents have to be considered?
Yeah. I have considered it, and the reason it wasn't public, we said on the site visit, is GDPR restrictions. So that's why it wasn't made public. But I've certainly considered it, Councillor, but I caveat that with the comments I made earlier. Can I just say, I meant to mention in my presentation, but there was a question asked about the distances between the dwellings. The minimum normal back-to-back for dwellings, good practice is 21 metres. In this case, it's actually 52 metres, so it's very generous. And as you may recall, between the dwellings, there's a very strong conifer screen as well, so that helps as well.
Okay, you're happy. Okay, right, Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, just following up on what Ms. Inston said earlier about validation being perhaps relevant. And it was the 28th of August that it was validated, and I've been copied into some of the enforcement correspondence that preceded that, and it looks as though the work started, that bit which is retrospective, after February, but I don't know whether that makes any difference to what you said before.
Need to check the dates in the legislation as to when, I don't know if Michael knows
I can probably help there. I don't know the specific dates, but even if you're correct, Councillor, because the applicant has voluntarily applied B&G anyway in terms of a quote planning gain and achieves in excess of 10%, then the committee, I would encourage you to take that into account, even if you're correct. And with respect, well, I don't know. I'm not going to make a judgment. You may not be correct. We'll put it that way. I don't know either.
No further questions, members? Who's going to open the debate? Councillor Vickers.
Chairman, I don't want to stop this going ahead at all, but I would quote from the applicant's own planning and design statement, where at para 531, when we're talking about screening, actually more or less offers in that, you know, further screening, it could be conditioned if that is the council's wish. And we've heard during the questioning of the applicant's agent that, you know, we're pushing an open door here. And it just seems desirable, highly desirable, I would say. And in fact, I'd be reluctant to vote for this, although I don't want to stop it. I would probably abstain if we can't get this additional condition about screening through. And bearing in mind, if this wasn't retrospective, and I know that's hypothetical, but there's a massive amount of earth movement, which of itself would have needed a planning application, never mind anything else that was done. And I'm not sure whether, you know, in that hypothetical situation, we'd have been looking at different conditions anyway, but we are where we are. So that's what I feel. I think it's got to go ahead, and I hope we can all agree something that everyone's happy with.
I think these points you've raised, Councillor Vickers, are very valid. Right, Councillor Amatraj.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be brief as well. As board member who called this in application for a number of reasons, I think it's obvious now that we need to consider a lot of conditions and aspects of the matter which is being brought before. I was particular to hear from the applicants the mixed land use, because it's been a question mark in terms of what is the purpose of this, converting this agricultural land into a mixed land use. I think I've got some confidence in that what they've mentioned, that it's going to be an auxiliary residence. So I'm satisfied with that. In terms of the considerations to the neighboring property, the Sandymead House and Mrs. Cooper's residents, and the vulnerable residents, that I wanted to get clarification, although the situation might change, but we have to consider what is in front of us. With that, and I'm happy for the conditions to be there, so I could support any motion in proposing this development to go ahead, but making sure as the conditions are met and the fencing or the boundary is as proposed by Mr. Councillor Vickers is addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Moving this forward, are we coming for? Oh, sorry, Councillor Dick. Sorry, I missed you. Sorry, I'm just trying to move it forward to see if there's a proposal coming forward.
Me too, Chairman. Thank you. We've heard what's been said. Councillor Vickers, I suggested his glass is half empty, but mine's half full. I'm very much in support of this application. I think I'm happy to propose it. The only question is the screening. And when I asked the officer previously, I let it go. He told us what we couldn't have. My question really was, what could we have that's in keeping with the area, gives a little bit of comfort to the neighbours, and that the residents are happy with. It's got to be a simple, small thing. And if that can be dealt with in the appropriate way, then I would propose that we support the officer's recommendation. Does that help?
Okay. Thanks, sir. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. When I saw this, first of all, I was a bit concerned, I must admit, with the access and the position in one thing and another. But having been to the site meeting and having heard the presentation from the officer tonight and the agent, all my concerns and answering the questions I had, I'm very happy to support this application and will second with your permission. My only concern that remains, and I maybe should have asked the officer of this, is obviously the views and the ambience, as it were, of that area. We are left with this sheer concrete wall, and I just wonder if there's anything that could be considered to soften that. I just open that up to the committee if they've got any ideas, as opposed to painting it white or a mural or just leaving it as it is. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts.
Is that to move it forward, Councillor Farage?
Yeah, just to answer, like we could propose this to Shockham Donington Parish and they can do something about that one.
Members, do we need to add any other conditions which? Oh, sorry, Councillor Foot.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I wonder if it's possible for us to, something that does concern me a bit, with the construction method statement and the hours of working, bearing in mind the neighbours. And I think from what we've heard tonight, the applicant and the agent is very happy to work with the neighbours. I'm just thinking that 7:30 in the morning till 6 p.m. Mondays to Fridays seems to me a little bit excessive. I don't know whether it's possible or reasonable even to condition slightly shorter hours, particularly in the morning, perhaps, with deference to the vulnerable neighbours next door. That was my only point. Thanks.
I will ask the officer, but of course I think quite often the standard operating hours are normally fixed throughout the week and the Saturday, unless it's for exceptional circumstances. Now, that's probably the point I'm going to ask the officer, exceptional circumstances, and I don't know whether that's what you're trying to address, Councillor Foot.
Thank you, Chair. I think officers would strongly recommend in this instance that members stick with the hours that are set out in the committee report. They're based on the standard acceptable working hours that environmental health adhere to generally in terms of noise complaints and construction working. And I think in this instance, whilst I appreciate the neighbouring property has carries, the shed spaces. Shared lives, sorry. I think in this instance, the use is still residential. It's just a residential use. I mean, and it's not an exceptional circumstance. And so I would strongly advise members that I don't think it would be reasonable to amend those hours.
Are you happy with that answer? Okay. Moving forward, we've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. Is there any other specific points that really we need to include in the motion at all? Right, Councillor Wollaston.
Sorry, Chair, I don't think we covered the point about the fencing or where it's going to be.
In terms of the fencing, officers can recommend a condition for boundary treatment along the southeast boundary because it's not really required for the other boundaries, just that boundary. So we can include a condition and we can just ensure that when we get the details that the fencing is suitable, that provides screening, but then is also suitable for the rural character of the area.
Chairman, I think Ms. Inston means the northeast corner, I think in a way. Yeah.
Sorry, councillor, I was doing the whole boundary of the site then being to the south, but the southeast boundary of the application site.
Yes, it's the northern end.
It's the northern end of the neighbouring.
That's where the
properties.
sensitive view is, yes.
We are all in agreement on that. Okay, all right. Okay, well, members, proposer, seconder, Greeley application. Can I have a show of hands then, please? Unanimous. Okay, that's a unanimous decision. And at that point, Councillor Abbs arrives. So we've just completed the first application, so we're just going to commence with a second one. I'll just pause for a moment. Presumably, members of the delegation for the first application are going to leave. Yes, okay. Okay, let's move on to the second application, which is 23/02643 OUT MAJ Premier Inn, Pinchington Lane, Newbury. And I will then formally invite Jake Brown to present the application. So it's over to you, Jake.
Sorry, Chairman, could I just make sure I've done my declarations, which I don't think I have any or been lobbied on any of these applications this evening. And again, my apologies for being late.
You made it quite clear, and I think you've come at a right time. It would have obviously been difficult if you'd have come in the middle of the first application. So
I would have been quiet for a change.
Yeah. So have you got a declaration to?
No, I haven't got it. Just to make sure I'm covered off. There is nothing from me.
So, sorry, I didn't include that. Over to you, Jake.
I do apologise, Chairman. I've just remembered I actually I was re-elected to Greenham Parish Council, so actually this one is in my ward, but I haven't been lobbied
before the application was considered, I suspect.
Sorry, in what way?
It came before the parish council.
When in its previous guise, I was a Greenham Parish Councillor. I
mean, I don't think really it's probably appropriate for us to start discussing this because it could be a case that you were a member of Greenham Parish Council when the first application come forward.
I certainly was.
But we're actually looking at the other application this time round.
That's fine, but I'm now a Greenham Parish Councillor again. So just to declare that. Okay.
Sorry, I will then ask you for the third time, Jake, to commence. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks outline planning permission for up to 9 dwellings on land currently used as car parking for the hotel, together with associated works, including the relocation of that car parking. The matters to be considered in the determination of this application are access, landscaping, and layout. The appearance and scale of the development proposed would be dealt with separately under a subsequent reserved matters application, should this application be approved. This application for outline planning permission has been brought to this committee for determination as it has received more than 10 representations objecting to the proposal, and officers are recommending approval. The application site is approximately 1.6 hectares and includes the Premier Inn Hotel, its associated parking and landscaped area, and tree-lined boundary along Deadman's Lane to the south. The area of existing landscaping directly adjacent to the hotel here previously accommodated a leisure block, which was historically used as a wedding venue and was demolished in 2015. The site has established mature planting and vegetation to all its boundaries. However, the trees are not protected by tree preservation orders. The site lies within a mixed-use area to the south of Newby Town Centre. The site is bounded by commercial uses to its north and east, including a large Tesco Extra superstore and petrol station here, and a range of car showrooms. To the south, on the opposite side of Deadman's Lane, is a residential estate here. To the west of the application site is the A339, beyond which is Newbury College, Highwood Copse Primary School, and the Waste Recycling Centre. Here we have a view of the application site from the access looking towards the entrance and the landscaped area in front of the entrance to the application site where parking is to be relocated to. And another view of that landscaped area to the front of the hotel where car parking is proposed. This is a view of the car parking area where the houses are proposed to be sited, looking westward. And another view of the car parking area where the houses are proposed, looking southeast. And this is a view from the western edge of the application site, looking across the car parking area where the houses are proposed. And here is a view of the easternmost part of the application site, which is an informal area of landscaping, again, where houses are proposed. And a view within that eastern area of the hotel grounds. Here we have a view along Deadman's Lane looking west. This photograph is taken approximately outside of what would be plots 8 and 9, the proposed dwellings. And then further down Deadman's Lane looking west outside of plots, approximately plots 6 and 7. And then looking east from Deadman's Lane, approximately standing outside of the shared access to plots 3 to 5. And finally, looking again down Deadman's Lane eastwards, outside of what would be plots 1 and 2. This plan shows the proposed layout and landscaping of the site, with the relocated car parking for the hotel here, and the proposed 9 dwellings with access points onto Deadman's Lane. The existing access into the hotel is to remain unchanged, but the internal roadway would be moved northwards. As shown by the faint red circles, 15 individual trees, 7 groups of trees, and 3 areas of hedgerow are to be removed to facilitate the development. The trees to be retained are shown with a green outline here. And new trees are shown as circles here. As shown on this plan, 77 new trees are proposed to be planted, 25 within the remaining grounds of the hotel, and 52 to the northern and southern boundaries of the area to be developed for housing. Mixed native hedgerow is also to be planted along parts of the southern boundary fronting the site with Dead Man's Lane. Along the eastern boundary fronting the pedestrian footpath into the commercial area, and the northern and western boundaries, as shown here. A previous application for a similar development was refused for 3 reasons as set out in section 2 of the agenda report. That decision was appealed. Reasons for refusal relating to biodiversity and affordable housing were adequately addressed during the consideration of the appeal through the provision of further information. However, the inspector in that appeal decided that amended plans submitted during the appeal to increase the number of parking spaces to overcome the remaining reason for refusal could not be considered, as they represented a substantive change to the scheme determined by the council. A copy of that appeal decision is provided at the end of the agenda report. Those amended plans sought to be submitted at the appeal, together with the additional information relating to biodiversity that was considered at the appeal, have been submitted in this application. This slide shows the only differences between the scheme considered by the inspector at appeal and the proposal before members now. The 2 red circled areas highlight the only changes in the proposed layout plan from that considered at the appeal, that being the reorientation and relocation of plot 1 westwards to accommodate 2 additional parking spaces between plots 1 and 2, and the provision of additional parking space for visitors in front of plot 3. Here we have the proposed rearrangement of the parking for the hotel. 117 car parking spaces exist for the hotel at present, and the proposed scheme would maintain that same number of hotel car parking spaces. This plan shows the mix and tenure of housing proposed, comprising 5 4-bed dwellings and 4 3-bed dwellings, 2 of which will be affordable as shown in orange and purple here. This slide shows an indicative street scene for the proposed housing when viewed from Dead Man's Lane. As scale and appearance are reserved matters and not to be considered at this stage, this plan is provided for information only. As set out in section 6 of the agenda report, the principle of the development is accepted, given the sustainable location of the site within the designated settlement boundary of Newbury. In respect of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the proposed relocated parking layout to the east of the hotel would have little impact, as that part of the site is well screened from the public realm at present. It is acknowledged that the loss of the existing vegetation within the application site and the development of the site for up to 9 dwellings would change the street scene of Dead Man's Lane and the character and appearance of the area. However, the introduction of up to 9 dwellings adjacent to an area already occupied by housing, together with the landscaping proposed, is not considered to harm the character and appearance of the area. The proposed and retained landscaping, together with the layouts of the proposed dwellings, is considered to provide a reasonable transition to the edge of the existing residential area. The impact on neighbouring amenity is assessed in detail on pages 58 to 60 of the agenda report. And for the reasons stated, the development proposed is not considered to introduce any significant impact in respect of noise, overbearing impact, overlooking and loss of privacy, or the loss of daylight and sunlight. The garden areas of the proposed dwellings are considered acceptable in terms of quality and size, and subject to conditions relating to contaminated land and noise assessment and mitigation measures, the impact on future occupiers would be acceptable. With regard to highways matters, sufficient car parking in accordance with policy P1 of the HSA DPD is proposed. Refuse collection for the housing will take place from Dead Man's Lane, with bins stored on the properties and refuse operatives moving bins to the refuse collection vehicle on the road, as is the case for existing properties along Dead Man's Lane. The impact on the highway network as a result of additional traffic or refuse collection would not be severe, and matters relating to highway safety have been assessed by the highways officer, who raises no objection to the development proposed. Construction traffic routes and parking is proposed to be appropriately secured through a construction method statement condition. The site is located within flood zone 1, and a flood risk assessment and drainage strategy report has been submitted, which confirms that the site is at low risk from fluvial, groundwater and sewage flooding. That assessment proposes permeable paving, soakaways, rain butts and attenuation tanks to be used in the development, and any surface water discharge would run into the existing surface water sewer. The applicant has provided copies of correspondence with Thames Water, where they confirm there is sufficient foul sewage capacity for foul water from the development proposed. The lead local flood authority have reviewed the application and raised no objections, subject to a condition to secure the precise details of the sustainable drainage systems to be used. The proposed development would achieve a biodiversity net gain of 14%, and bat boxes, bird boxes and bee bricks would be installed together with measures to mitigate the impact on biodiversity. The council's ecologist considers that sufficient information has been provided, and they raise no objections, subject to conditions to secure a construction and environmental management plan, a landscape and ecological management plan, protection of breeding birds during construction, a lighting design strategy for light-sensitive biodiversity, biodiversity measures, and further ecological surveys if the development does not commence within 18 months of the decision. As concluded by the inspector in the appeal, the landscape strategy would re-establish a meaningful and well-connected area of new vegetation, which is likely to be attractive to birds and small mammals. The inspector also considered there would be adequate protection of existing habitats, and a measurable net gain in biodiversity could be achieved through the proposed landscape strategy and other ecological enhancements, such that the effect on biodiversity would be acceptable, subject to those conditions. In addition, the inspector in their determination of the appeal did not raise any issues regarding design, impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on neighbouring amenities, impact on future occupiers, flooding and drainage, loss of trees and landscaping, or affordable housing provision. Furthermore, the inspector did not raise issues relating to traffic increase or the proposed accesses for the dwellings onto Dead Man's Lane. This application is considered to have adequately addressed the only reason for the dismissal of the appeal, that being the under-provision of car parking spaces for housing contrary to policy P1 of the HSA DPD. For the reasons set out in the agenda report, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with the development plan as a whole, and subject to conditions and a planning obligation, represents sustainable development for the purposes of the NPPF. As such, members are recommended to grant approval subject to the satisfactory completion of the planning obligation and conditions proposed, as set out in section 8 of the agenda report. Should the planning obligation not be completed by the 20th of February 2025, officers recommend that the application is refused for the reasons set out in section 8 of the agenda report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jake. Paul, wish to make some observations?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As mentioned by my colleague Jake Brown, the 117 car parking spaces that currently serve the hotel are being retained, and access is being retained for any delivery vehicles that will serve the hotel. The 9 dwellings being proposed onto Dead Man's Lane, we would expect during the busier periods of the day, during the week, the AM peak and the PM peak, for there to be some 4 to 5 vehicle movements during that peak hour. And in our view, that's a very low number of vehicle movements for this dwelling. for these dwellings that are proposed. We are aware of some concerns regarding pedestrian movements along Dead Man's Lane, which are fair enough, but there is also a footway on the other side of the site that already accommodates pedestrians. There are in total of 5 vehicle accesses proposed, with one serving 3 of the dwellings. All of the accesses are of sufficient width, and all of them will have sight lines that comply to national standards set in the government's manual for streets. The hedging fronting the site will clearly need to be removed in order to accommodate the sight lines. And hedging going east would also need to be trimmed to provide sight lines to the most eastern properties that are proposed. Refuse, as mentioned by Jake Brown, will be collected from Dead Man's Lane, as is the usual case for such dwellings and existing dwellings along Dead Man's Lane. Yes, the refuse vehicle may provide a bit of obstruction for a few minutes when it's there collecting refuse, but in our view, that would be for a few minutes at most once a week. And on that basis, it's difficult to object to. As mentioned by Jake Brown, 23 car parking spaces are proposed. Your parking standards for 3 or 4 bed dwellings are 2.5 spaces per dwelling, which equates to 22.5 rounded up to 23. Cycle storage and electric vehicle charging points will be secured by condition along with any construction management plan. And on that basis, your highway officers also raise no objection to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Again, on this application, we haven't got a representative of the parish council. So I immediately call upon Ian Blair, the objector, to come and give, in your case, is it 5 minutes or you wish to be notified after 4?
5 minutes will be fine, thank you.
Okay, cheers, thanks.
Good evening, Chairman, members. My name is Ian Blair. I've been a resident of Dead Man's Lane for 22 years. I'm here tonight to speak to you on behalf of the residents of Dead Man's Lane and Priory Place. It is disappointing to see that the applicant chose not to engage with the community and not produce a statement of community involvement. One can only assume that is because they do not care about the community. There are many problems with the application before you. It is astonishing that the Highways Department has seen fit to not raise an objection. It is abundantly clear to all residents that highway safety is a significant issue. Insufficient footways, a narrow carriageway and poor visibility are a constant risk to vehicles and pedestrians on Dead Man's Lane. Members will hopefully have seen this for themselves during their site visit. You may have witnessed the conflict created by commercial vehicles parked in lay-bys, numerous delivery vans, plus residents' traffic, all of which results in vehicles needing to take evasive action, stop and reverse in both directions frequently. There are significant numbers of pedestrians using Dead Man's Lane. They comprise elderly residents of Sandalford Lodge Park, some of whom use mobility scooters and wheelchairs, also young families with pushchairs walking to and from Highwood Copse Primary School, and older children walking to St Gabriel's School, all of which must use the carriageway at certain points, as the footway does not run continuously along Dead Man's Lane and dropped curbs do not exist in positions where you can stay out of the carriageway. The visibility sight lines shown on the application plans do not consider visibility for vehicles reversing out of driveways. Whilst problematic throughout the application, it is of particular concern for plot 7, 8 and 9, which are located closest to the blind bend by the Tesco footpath. The visibility sight line for plot 9 in particular is unachievable, not only in a forward gear, but also even worse in reverse. Turning to vehicle swept paths. These are produced in a perfect digital environment with the user able to model the vehicle movements as many times as they need to produce a successful outcome. Unfortunately, in the real world, highway safety is defined by the inconsistent actions of human beings, where poor judgment or distractions occur and bad weather conditions exist. Who here can say that they have reversed their car in or out of a parking space perfectly every time? Why do the swept paths shown on the plans only reflect the original application and not the current one? That suggests to me that the application plans have not been reviewed properly. These swept path plans show in certain locations, vehicles are unable to enter or exit driveways without needing to position the vehicle right up against the curb edge. This doesn't happen. Or to overhang the footway. This represents a risk to the pedestrians using the footway, which exists only on the southern side of Dead Man's Lane. With regard to ecology and trees, it is nonsensical that the removal of, quote, large existing grassed area containing natural habitat for flora, fauna, birds, mammals and reptiles can be enhanced by 14% under BNG by providing proprietary bird boxes, bat boxes and bee bricks. I'm sure that the species that occupy that part of the site will be delighted to hear this. The committee report states that the proposal will not harm the character and appearance of the area. And the planning statement asserts that the proposal will have no detrimental effects with regard to residential amenity. Statements produced by someone sitting behind a desk.
1 minute.
Thank you. And repeated in every planning application I have ever seen, of which there are many. I am yet to be convinced that the removal of, again, quotes, significant amount of existing vegetation cannot harm the character, appearance and residential amenity. Trees and hedges will be replaced by bricks and tiles, and the replacement planting, if allowed to survive by the new residents, will take a good number of years to grow to mirror what is there presently. There is no on-site open space proposed. Surely the logical answer to mitigating ecological impact is to leave the green space that's there presently. I've heard the comment, the right to a view is not a mere material consideration many times. It is, however, a material consideration for those residents that chose to live on Dead Man's Lane and Priory Place. The applicant is seeking to dismantle one of the very reasons why we chose to live there.
Can you conclude, please?
This application is a clumsy attempt to squeeze a quart into a pint pot to generate a land sale with no consideration to its effects. I therefore respectfully ask the members of this committee refuse this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions for Ian Blair? Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, you obviously lived there a long time in that part of Greenham, Newbury, whatever we call it. And Dead Man's Lane's been there a long time. When was Dead Man's Lane last sort of improved? Because it must have been a country lane originally. And could you recount the sort of stages at which the numbers of dwellings that use it have increased from what originally to what it is now?
The 16 dwellings that form Priory Place and the house I live in on Dead Man's Lane were there as what was the former riding school, I believe. They were built in 99, 98, that's about then.
And was that when Dead Man's Lane was first adopted as a road? Or?
Well, Dead Man's Lane's been there for a long time, but then I think those were the first homes built there. Then there was 27 homes built at the end of Dead Man's Lane by David Wilson Homes. That would have been in about 2004.
When they moved the household waste recycling centre around about then, wouldn't it?
No,
They replaced.
No, that's a different.
I'm just trying to get a picture of how much has gone on in that area. Since Dead Man's Lane was first a single track road.
I have to say, I don't recall there being any particular improvement works at Dead Man's Lane itself.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
I think the largest change was when the land to the east was developed and the entrance way from the roundabout
and all around that. Yeah.
Yes, and then what was called the Hounsel land, which was that had about 120 homes built on.
Thank you. That's helped, I think, with the history of the area.
Any other further questions? No, I think you can be relieved. Okay, thank you very much. Now I call upon Simon Millett, the agent, and I'm not certain whether he's present or whether he's on Zoom. Ah,
hello,
Simon. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Can you hear us? Okay.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can. And you know the procedure. You've got 5 minutes presentation.
Yes.
And we will notify you after 4 minutes if you so wish.
Okay. Yeah, I won't take that long.
Okay, over to you then.
Thank you. Yeah. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this outline application. Yeah, not wanting to repeat everything which Jake and Paul have just said, I will simply re-emphasise a few key points, if I may. The proposed development seeks to provide new family housing on previously developed land within Newbury's settlement boundary and urban area. This is exactly where the core strategy directs this type of development. In addition to new family housing, the proposals provide on-site affordable housing. A compliant number of car parking spaces serving the new houses is provided as part of this application. This addresses the previous reason for refusal and single reason the planning appeal was dismissed. Your highways officer has confirmed that the parking provision and the development's impact on the highway network is acceptable and safe. In the appeal, which mirrored this application, the inspector raised no other concerns in regard to the proposed development. The proposals deliver a biodiversity net gain of 14% through the delivery of the proposed landscaping scheme, including 77 new trees. Finally, the proposals before you this evening are entirely in accordance with the development plan and NPPF and therefore represent sustainable development. Thank you for your time, and I hope you can support this application.
Okay, right. If you can just stay on the screen, because members might wish to ask questions.
Sure.
Members, questions at all? Yes, Councillor Amathraj.
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Just a question on the biodiversity gain. You said 14%. Okay, I'll take it as face value with the planting of 77 trees. Do you reckon how long it will take to achieve that? Because the planting of trees, I reckon it will be saplings, not trees, full-grown trees.
Yeah.
Just on the question follow-up, sorry, I'll finish that one. So how long are you proposing to maintain that landscape or making sure as they are able to grow sufficiently to achieve that net gain? Because often we see developers hand it over to management companies or to the residents and it's just gone to waste. So can you please explain that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the type of trees and planting, it will be varied, and the exact details will be submitted as part of a condition, which is on the recommended list of conditions. So that is to be submitted and approved by your planning officer and consultees. And then in terms of maintaining the landscaping, the applicant and the applicant will be responsible for maintaining that for a set number of years after the houses have been built and occupied. I believe that's 3 or 5, but perhaps the planning officer could confirm. Again, that's conditioned.
Is that
Chairman, one more question now. Mr. Millen, you mentioned about affordable housing. We saw that in the plan. What we can see is they are 2 affordable housing nested together. They are adjacent. Is there any reason why they are towards the end of the plot and they are nested together instead of spread across? Is there any reason?
Yeah, it's potentially to allow those affordable housing units to be, well, it's kind of legal and operational, and how it will be implemented, whether any future permission will be sold to an operator, and those two houses on the end will be delivered kind of by the same person.
Thank you, Chairman.
But
Thanks very much, Chair. Mr. Millett, you might have heard Mr. Blair when he mentioned in his presentation that there had been no consultation with residents, and certainly when we were on the site visit, it's absolutely true that Dead Man's Lane is a narrow lane with difficult sight lines, and obviously there are a lot of houses to the south of Dead Man's Lane. Can I ask you, has the agent at any stage reached out to local residents, to your knowledge, or had any sort of consultation with them, please? Thanks.
So we did go through the formal pre-application route with the council. I think regrettably we didn't do a specific neighbour consultation event, and in hindsight, that would have been a better thing to do. So yeah, apologies to Ian and the local community for not doing that.
did you want to follow up? Oh, you happy? Okay. From the chair, I'd like to sort of follow up the comment that Councillor Foote made in relationship to the earlier presentation of Ian Blair, and obviously the narrowness of the lane where the buildings which, excuse me, where the buildings, excuse me, that's the trouble when you got a cold. The buildings that will form part of this application, if the committee is mindful enough to accept it tonight, is that obviously there will be a confined compound for the building of the properties. And my slight concern is where will all the construction traffic, lorries, and obviously all the workforce, where will they be sited? Because obviously that lane is being used by a large number of existing residents. So what is your plan in regarding the construction management plan during the construction phase?
Yeah, I would say I'm not going to say that I know that now, because I don't. It's something that is conditioned. A construction management plan is conditioned and will be subject to consultation with the highways officer. But yeah, knowing the site and knowing what's available, it would make sense for the compound to be within the Premier Inn site and access to come from the north through the commercial area where the roads are wider.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that you would consider access into the hotel site would be the access for any construction.
Yeah, I mean, the applicant to this application is the hotel, and the land which is needed to deliver this development is Premier Inn's site, so they definitely have the ability to deliver it within the site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at all for the applicant? No? Okay, thanks very much. You can be relieved now.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Williston.
Having just looked through the conditions that are currently proposed, I can't see any mention of the trees being protected for any period at all. So I think I'd like to know whether you're agreeable, your client will be agreeable to a 5 or 10 year period.
Yes, I mean, I can have a quick check here. It was my understanding that there would typically be a condition which, if a tree dies within X number of years, the applicant is required to replace it, to replant it.
And do you have any objection to that being 10 years?
I would be guided on the council's usual 10 sounds longer than normal, so whether that's reasonable is one for the planning officer to guide on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, looking around the table, I can't see any other members wishing to ask questions, so thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I now call upon my fellow ward member, Councillor Billy Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did think you were going to join me tonight, but never mind. I know Dead Man's Lane very well, as I walk my two children there every morning, along with many other parents and carers, to High Cop School, and what a lovely walk it is, so peaceful. At this moment in time, only 3-year classes with a further class each year until year 6, when there will be double the number of pupils, with most of them walking through from Dead Man's Lane and surrounding estates. Also, can I put on record that I'm not a NIMBY. The Greenham ward has probably had more houses and flats built than any other ward in West Berkshire. Here are some of my concerns. Large destruction of trees with no demonstration of how gain of the biodiversity will be made. Issues with access given nature of existing road, the alternative already available through the Premier Inn, and the removal of historic boundary trees which all act as a sound barrier. Inadequate parking arrangements. It will create additional traffic hazards on Dead Man's Lane. This application needs a noise impact assessment as very close to near Tesco's, the A339 and the recycling centre. If offers recommend approval of this application, then I suggest a condition is added that double yellow lines are put along Dead Man's Lane running west to protect residents from businesses parking outside their property. So we'll finish by asking members to vote against offers recommends for approval. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Drummond. Right, Councillor Vickers, question.
Thank you, Councillor Drummond. You referred to the increase in numbers going to Highwood Cop School, which reminded me that winding back the years, when the consultation period ended on the previous application, that school wasn't even open, I don't believe. And certainly it's massively increasing in numbers. And of course, last week we had the Aldi application and another 70 or 80 homes. That's going to happen too. So do you think that the situation has changed with regarding to the amount of traffic on Dead Man's Lane, particularly I'm talking about pedestrians and those sort of people, since the last application, in your opinion?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, especially walking to school, it's really popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people then will just end up getting the car down to the school and going down and round.
We don't want that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? Okay, I think you can be relieved. Return back to the back benches. Thank you. Members, questions to Jake and Paul. Right, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, thank you. Question to Mr. Goddard, or seeking clarity, I guess, from Mr. Goddard. On the site visit, it's very, very clear that the sight lines are difficult. And you mentioned improving or taking hedges down, I believe, to improve displays. Have you got anything to kind of give us some level of comfort? I know that you're great with your numbers and you will have done it all, but is there anything that we can visualize that might help us kind of, or anything you can say to help us kind of understand how it will be achieved? Sorry, I was speaking the wrong way. I'll just do it that way next time.
Chairman, except for by looking at the drawings that are submitted, the level of sightlines required have been designed for vehicles travelling on the lane at 30 miles per hour, which in itself is probably unlikely. So the number of sightlines being proposed for each access is well in excess of what is probably required. And the sightlines being proposed before you are 2.4 by 43 metres. So the 2.4 is within the centre of the proposed access from the edge of the carriageway, and then you should be able to look 43 metres in either direction. At the moment, that's not achievable because of all the vegetation and hedging that is overgrown and is there. Within those sight lines, all that hedging and vegetation will need to be cleared to a minimum height of 0.6 metres. And all that land required for those sight lines is either within land owned by the applicant or is land.
So just going on from that slightly, it's taken down and it's cleared, and on day one, it meets the standard. And one assumes that therefore, if we were trying to refuse this on that grounds at appeal, we would just lose because it meets the standard. But what about day 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, 10 years later? That's 0.6 meters is very specific that you just mentioned. How do we get some assurance that it will be maintained to that level to keep the sight lines?
I would suggest that that is an issue everywhere. Hedge maintenance, yes, hedge maintenance, but it's difficult to use that as a reason for refusal because we as Highway Authority have our own powers to force people when necessary to maintain hedges under Section 63 of the Highways Act 1980. We can serve notice on people if their hedges are overgrown and obstruct sight lines or footways or carriageways. So we already have those powers within our control, and any planning inspector would take that in mind. So it would be difficult for us to object on that on maintenance issues.
Yeah, excuse me, who owns the land that needs maintaining?
The land is either owned by the applicant or is within land that is public highway.
Which is us to maintain anyway?
Yes.
Okay,
or
thank you
should
very
be.
much. Thanks very much.
Okay, I've got 5 speakers so far. So starting with Councillor Dick, 6 now.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the officers for this report. And just to step back for a moment, looking at what's proposed in an unused part of an hotel grounds in the middle of Newbury is really rather clever and really rather a good use of that space. So I compliment the applicant and the way the officers have worked on that. The clear issue is Dead Man's Lane, and I read the inspector's report. I trust our officers. I hear what they say, that they feel that they have met the concerns of the inspector, and that's obviously something that looms large for us. But they certainly haven't made the local residents happy. It's very, very clear that local knowledge suggests that this is going to be a big problem. And it's not just sightlines, it's simply a very narrow lane with a lot of traffic and more to come. And I'm told that the footpath, we hear the footpath isn't continuous. Is that true? And if it is true, can something be done about that, at least?
Paul.
I heard what the speaker, Mr. Blair, had to say, and it is correct that there is not a footway that continues all along Dead Man's Lane up to Pinchington Lane. The footway is diverted northwards through into the triangle just to the east of the site. There's also a link to the south into Laurel Gardens. So there are routes out of Dead Man's Lane that pedestrians can take to travel north towards Tesco's and westwards towards Pinchington Lane. And that was how the housing estate was originally designed. But from just to the east of the site, all the way through to the A339, the footway is continuous on the south side. Except for a small section around the access to the caravan park, Sanderford Lodge. I can't remember its exact name. I think with I don't know why that section hasn't been built. It may be that we maybe some level reasons or engineering reasons why we can't do that. It is something that we could look into going forward. The development would provide community infrastructure levy money, which could be used to improve footways along there going forward. As with all development proposals, SIL monies would be provided. But other than that, the footway is continuous and pedestrian routes from the area are adequate in my view, going in all directions.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Hooker.
Thank you. Maybe Mr. Brown could answer this question. It's just for my own information, I think. What was I of the understanding that affordable houses, although I'm very pleased to see them on this application, were they not actually required on building of houses less than 10? Or has that changed? There was no requirement for social housing 10 and less. Once you went over 10, then it had to be 5, is it? Well, just looking at.
Chairman, if I can clarify, policy CS6 of the core strategy requires for sites on where between 5 and 9 dwellings are proposed 20% to be affordable.
5 and 9. So okay, it was 9, not 10. Thank you. The second question is that this application has come to us with the amendment with accommodating the inspector's requirements of parking. That was a while ago, and Mr. Blair made a very strong case, I think, with regard to the pedestrianisation on Dead Man's Lane. And Councillor Drummond has made the case there that the school pupillage has gone up and that therefore the number of children maybe using that lane has now increased. This is a different situation now, is it not, from when the inspector looked at it the first time? So this is really an additional consideration, would you agree, that this committee needs to take in account, as opposed to, yes, you've done the parking, therefore the weight would be in benefit of approval. Do you see where I'm going with that question? We're in a different situation now with regards to the use of that road on pedestrianisation, as opposed to when the inspector looked at it first time and didn't make a comment on it.
You shook your head, Paul. Are you understanding Councillor Hooker's question?
Not quite, Chairman. I think the question, if I've interpreted it correctly, is that we had the original planning application from 2021. The school opposite side of the road has increased in numbers. Does that change my thinking on whether the site is suitable for these 9 houses? Have I got that about right? I fully agree with what Councillor Drummond said. Clearly, the school is getting busier. It will be full within a few years. But what I would do in response to that is consider the proposal that's before you itself for 9 dwellings. And we would expect between 0800 and 0900 in the morning, about 4 or 5 vehicles to leave the site, which is very low in my view. And we can only object to planning applications under the National Planning Policy Framework if the impact is severe, and an additional 4 or 5 vehicle movements per hour, in our view, is not at all severe. And therefore, I think we would struggle to refuse the planning application on traffic terms, even with the expected increase in pedestrian movements associated with the school to the west of the site, in my view.
Did you wish to follow that up at all, Councillor Hooker?
Well, I think my surprise is that I think of the residents that if you've got 9 houses, how do you only get 4 or 5 car movements at that time of the morning? But maybe Mr. Goddard can expand on that.
I can explain on that. The residents of Greenham, every census, tell the census that they own, on average, about 1.6 1.7 cars per house. Notwithstanding our parking standards, which are higher than that, if you have an average of 1.6 cars owned per house, and then you would consider that there would be retired people that whatever aren't working, or even these days, people working from home. So out of that 1.6, you could then expect an average of about 1 car leaving per house in the morning. Now, some may say, well, I have 2 cars and we leave the house, but then your neighbouring property might have none because they may be retired, etc. So out of that 1 car that we've got leaving the house in the morning, about half of those would probably leave between 8 and 9 in the morning. Okay, what about the other 0.5? Well, that would probably leave earlier or even later than 9 o'clock in the morning, because not everybody leaves the house between 0800 and 0900. It's spread out much more over the period of the morning when people leave. And of course, there's the mirror image then when people return in the afternoon. We also have a national database called the Trip Rate Information Computer System. Some members may have heard me talk about it before. It's a national survey database of many different land uses, including residential. And from this database, we come up with about 0.5, 0.6 vehicle movements between 0800 and 0900 for residential, and the same during the PM peak. And we ourselves, in previous years, previous planning applications such as Coley Farm at Stoney Lane, have done similar surveys and come up with similar results. I hope that, a bit long-winded, but I hope that answers the question.
Having heard the answer, it's explained it very clearly. Thank you, and I can understand that now. Thank you, Mr. Gott.
Thank you. Right, moving on to Councillor Vickers.
It's similar on similar lines, but I also want to focus on the vehicle inbound, vehicle outbound. What do we call it? The turning circle. I think there's a document, swept path analysis on the file. Now, plot 9, you show as having to reverse onto the road at a point where it is at its narrowest and right next to this footpath crossing that you referred to. So I'm concerned because normally we don't allow that on new developments. Now I'm not against the development of this site for housing, but I think that's just 1-2 house for that one reason alone. And I say again, you know, there's quite a massive increase in the amount of pedestrian use of Dead Man's Lane since the consultation period ended on these matters. We didn't even have the Blore Homes appeal decided then, let alone the other part of Sandalford, let alone the fact there's 2 more schools going on that piece of land. Haven't we surely got to consider what we know is going to happen in the next few years, as well as what is happening now when we're looking at these issues around the highway access and the amount of traffic? And particularly, you've got a vehicle reversing every morning, probably. This is the social housing unit where they are likely to be going to work at the normal times. They're not likely to be working from home, I would suggest, in social housing.
Chairman, I consider that I've mentioned the expected increase in traffic from the site and argued that its impact is limited, and in detail to questions from Councillor Hooker. I have the swept path drawings open like you have there. And plot 9, it shows it reversing very close to where the footpath comes out from the triangle to the north. Yes, perhaps it's not ideal, but the question is it sufficient to us to warrant refusal? It will at most be a vehicle reversing out of that property perhaps 2 or 3 times a day. What would be the chances of it meeting anything on the road or or a pedestrian, perhaps, even though there is a pedestrian footway opposite, I think is very, very low. And therefore, it would be difficult to sustain an objection, in my view.
Would it possibly be something we could have a condition on, even if it's not a reason for refusal? That is looked at and adjusted, or have we got to look at only what's before us?
It would be the threat path analysis diagrams. They're obviously, as Mr. Blair was correct when he said that it is a computer package. There are various packages called AutoTrack, for instance. Normally, it's very generous. It does take account of human frailties in steering a car at times. It is possible that that vehicle could reverse the other way, in the other direction that has been shown, and avoids that pedestrian crossing there, the footpath that goes into the triangle. But I think that's been shown for our purposes to show that a vehicle can reverse out of there. Whether we can look at it a bit more, or what would we do? We could perhaps angle the driveway a little bit further away from that footpath there. That could be possible, to angle it a bit of an angle, so it makes it difficult and discourages vehicles to reverse in front of that footpath from the triangle. That might be possible. This is an outline application. I don't know how much is confined at this stage, and whether any tweaks could be made to the layout going forward. I'm asking planners here now.
Thank you, Chair. I can answer that question. The application before members is for layout and access to be considered. So any changes, you have to consider the plans in front of you in terms of layout and access. The only reserved matters is scale and appearance. So there wouldn't be the opportunity within this plan to make amendments to the layout. Members are to consider the plans in front of them.
Okay, right, moving on. I've got several other members before. Clearly, certain members are wishing to come back on the question. Councillor Foot's the next one on the list.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. My question's to Mr. Goddard as well. I'm referring to paragraph 15 of the appeal decision, which is on page 82 in our pack. And the first sentence is, there are no apparent parking restrictions along most of Dead Man's Lane. Now, if we're going to have these developments, you've just mentioned, Mr. Goddard, that on average up at Greenham, people have between 1.6 and maybe 1.7 vehicles that they own. My concern is that if we take, for example, a weekend when people are at home, and there might be 1 or possibly 2 cars parked in the driveways of these houses and they have visitors, there is a risk, in my opinion, that visitors might park on the street. And I would think, at the very least, we need double yellow lines all the way along that stretch, because I think all of us are concerned about the narrowness of Dead Man's Lane and the difficulty of that bend. You mentioned the footpath to the triangle, the difficulty of that bend, and we just heard that plot 9, they will have to reverse out. So there are considerable anxieties I would have regarding the safety along that lane. And the final thing is, you mentioned there may be scope for improving the footpath along there so that it is quite clearly a safe footpath all the way along there until you get to the A339. And again, I personally would like to see something along those lines, you know, possibly with CIL funding or something along those lines. Maybe you'd like to comment on that. Thank you.
Chairman, the purpose of the community infrastructure levy is that developers fund future improvements in order to accommodate any increased impact from their development. And yes, I see no reason why we couldn't provide some improvements to the footway opposite the site, if required, in liaison with the parish council. The provision of a traffic regulation order to provide yellow lines, and I heard it mentioned earlier, we cannot secure this through a planning application. That would need to be something that would need to be pursued by the parish council. And the reason why I suggest that is because that is a separate consultation process that would need to take place with residents. And the risk with all consultation processes is that it may fail. Residents may actually object to the provision of WLO lines because all of a sudden I can't park outside my house. So if there is a community desire for weighting restrictions along their WLO lines, that's something that the parish council could pursue outside of this planning application going forward with colleagues in traffic management and road safety. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Gaines was next on my list. Got your...
Councillor Foot's done it to me again. I was going to ask exactly the same question about the footway and whether we could put something in there to make sure there was a continuous footway. So it's already been answered. Thank you, Chair. Again.
Thanks very much. Right, I think it was your good self, Councillor Amazon.
Thank you, Chairman. First question to Mr. Goddard. I can see, I think the committee can see the concerns raised by the residents, particularly Mr. Blair. Your comments on the vehicles having to reverse because of the single carriage. So have officers considered providing or securing a refuge area instead of the cars having to reverse all the way at both ends? Because if there is a possibility, even by your provision, that the assumption that there would be 4 or 5 cars, if at let's say 8:30 in the morning there are 4 cars lining up to come out the dead man's lane and there are cars on the other end coming back, it would be a nightmare situation. So are officers considering providing a refuge area for the cars to just park in the time where there is allowing the other side to move on? Number 2, question to case officer. I can see there are public, not public, I want to get it clarified, but there are open spaces. My question is, who maintains that open space? Because I'm particularly interested in that topic. You might say, like, because it's always that open spaces or public open spaces are not well maintained, or if they are maintained, they are being maintained by some private management companies. And the adjoining question on that one is, I can see that there would be a footpath or footways, and particularly during winters, is there a provision for footpath lighting for that area for the residents to use? Otherwise, the 9 houses, residents in those, particularly, and also school children or young adults traveling, crossing that one would be going through in the dark. Can you please clarify that one, please?
Chairman, there is already street lighting in the location there, and we consider that the route is adequately lit in our view. Your first question was about whether to have refuges for cars to reverse into out of the site. Well, firstly, I would say it would be extremely unlikely that you would have a vehicle reversing out of all 5 driveways at the same time, with the number of houses involved, as per my previous answers. But vehicles reversing out from private drives onto residential roads is nothing unusual. All of the housing developments there have a similar arrangement, and the road fronting most of the site is 4.8 metres wide. It's only on the eastern side, near where the eastern plot is, the eastern two or three plots, is where it narrows and becomes one-way working. But most of the road fronting the site is actually the standard 4.8 metre wide width. And as I say, it's not unusual for vehicles to reverse out onto residential streets of this nature. So my answer is I do not consider a refuge to be necessary in this case. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry, and the question about the open spaces and movement.
a question, sorry, carry on, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I asked the question, so just want to clarify. Sorry, who maintains that open space behind the plot 3, 4, 5 and all this words and all the hedges and all the stuff? Because there's this question asked that if they are not maintained, that will affect the site view.
Thank you, Chairman. The amenity areas to the front of plots 3, 4, and 5 would be maintained by a body or organisation, details of which are secured by condition 10 under the Landscape and Ecological Management Plan. So at this stage, we don't have the precise details of who would be managing it, but we would be seeking to secure that management of those spaces and all of the landscaping that's been put forward as ecological enhancement for the site.
Okay, Sir Abs. I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, we were just trying to look at that ourselves on the screen. I'm sorry to apologise. I made some notes and now my screen's locked just at an inappropriate moment. Bear with me 1 second. Really back to Deborah Innocent. Could we do an informative about this issue on Unit 9, even though we can't? You were making the point about we can't change the planning application, but we can have informatives during our decision making and say that this should be looked at because of the concerns of the residents, and the applicant's agent did apologise for not consulting the residents, in which case it might have been resolved before we even got here, but they didn't. So can we do an informative?
Do you mean an informative to angle the driveway?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, an informative really isn't, because it doesn't carry any, it's advisory, but to angle that driveway would mean the only way you could do that would be to alter the layout of plot 9.
Yeah.
Slightly. And so that would go beyond what an informative is there to achieve. So I would say.
You're saying there's absolutely nothing
it.
we can do, right?
No, members have to consider the plan as it is, and Sorry.
Yeah, we don't have an ecology officer with us tonight, do we?
No, I'm afraid we don't.
So I would have had questions about how this BNG gain is being achieved. I'd like to have understood from the officer, given the obvious negatives before we even begin on any positives, how we end up with a positive of such a large degree. But we can't answer that question. We can't.
Well, I'm looking at Jake, and I'm just wondering in what detail would you be able to supply an answer to Councillor Abs?
I'll do my best, Chairman, but I am not a qualified ecologist. But however, with these applications, as with most applications these days that have the legislative requirement for a biodiversity net gain, there is a metrics spreadsheet that is completed and submitted, which contains an assessment of the site as existing and the site as proposed. And through that spreadsheet, it gives points, for want of a better word, towards the existing and the proposed ecology, and comes out with a figure at the end. So that's, in crude terms, how the biodiversity net gain.
So long as they filled that spreadsheet in honestly and implement what's in the spreadsheet, then come an appeal, there wouldn't be any chance of that holding up either then.
The ecologists, when they review the application, do go into quite detail. with this particular site, for the previous application that went to appeal, it was originally refused on biodiversity grounds. One of the issues was raised regarding the biodiversity net gain metric not being completed correctly. However, that was addressed during the appeal, and the ecologist has looked in detail again for this application and considers the figures that they have used to be accurate. That's as far as I can go. So
Yeah, so personal belief doesn't come into this one, I'm afraid. The appeal decision already backs up the acceptance of the current ecological delivery and the gain that is being said to exist.
Yes, correct. The inspector has considered that information and confirmed it's correct.
Did you wish to add anything at all, Deborah?
No, Chair. Jake has covered it. Thank you.
Members, have we exhausted all the questions to officers? No, Councillor Hooker wants to come back.
On the BNG, we got the red line around the 9 houses. Does the BNG also apply to the hotel site? That's changed as well now, hasn't it?
Chairman, the application site defined by the red line is actually around the whole of the hotel and the housing site, and the landscaping ecological management plan would be covering the open amenity areas for the housing, the hedgerow boundary between the housing and the hotel, and the landscaping of the hotel itself.
Okay, thank you.
Looking around the table, it does look as if we've exhausted the questions, so we're now in debate. Who is going to open up the debate? Right, Councillor Abbs.
Sorry, I'm not going to make any proposal one way or the other, but from my perspective, what's weighing on my mind is that we have had this go to appeal once, and the reasons that it was refused then have essentially been addressed, which leaves me wondering how, on what I would pin any reasons to refuse on that would actually succeed at appeal. And I'm afraid I'm struggling. Maybe other members can help me with it, but I can't think of a single thing that we could legitimately refuse it on. Whether we think it's the right thing for the area or not, it seems not that's not actually the planning policy and not the decision we're making. We're saying, well, does this meet the criteria of the planning policies? Yes or no? And if we were to refuse it, as we've found out in recent applications, we must give very clear reasons to the officers if we're going against their advice, and we would be going against their advice. So I'm struggling a bit. So that's where I'm at the moment.
The Vickers next.
Yeah, well, see if I can help a little bit. I mean, bear in mind that the previous application was refused under delegated powers. So this is the first time this committee has considered this matter. I don't know whether that would strengthen a defence under appeal, but I sort of feel it ought to. Also, that we're talking about an application of up to 9. So it's within the applicant's, own ability to actually have 8. And even if we approve it, remember the original Sandalford application was up to 1,000, and that's considerably less now because they realised it wasn't possible, even though the access was unchanged. And also, I think we can probably say that the situation has changed significantly in the last few years in the amount of pedestrian traffic that's going to be using this. I know we've had quite a long time of discussion with questions to Mr. Goddard on this, but I suggest, members, that we might give it a go at refusing on that ground, that irrespective of an appeal which was held some time ago and a public consultation that was held even longer ago, when these things wouldn't have come up because they weren't actually the facts on the ground or the facts in terms of plans that had been approved nearby. As also this issue of the the refuse lorries. Now, I live in Westfields, which has loads of single track roads, but it's a network of roads, and you're never completely prevented from getting to work or getting home by the presence of a refuse lorry blocking your road for several minutes. We've now got a road which is going to be blocked by a refuse vehicle, and that is cutting off 100 dwellings and all the traffic to and from them, from traffic arriving there, and this is on a single track road, so with a lot of pedestrians. I just think the applicant should have provided a place off the main highway for a vehicle. Maybe it means the highway has to adopt it under the insurance regs for Veolia. I know we always have that issue, but I'm very uncomfortable letting this through as it is, members, and I think I've sort of suggested some things that might enable this to survive an appeal.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Hooker, I think you were next on.
Yeah, thank you. I tend to agree with Councillor Abbs on this. My concern is that this has been to appeal. It's been to the inspector. He's found these issues which the applicant has put right. My concerns were dead man's lane, and I appreciate the points that Councillor Vickers has put, but whether or not this committee would refuse this application because of refuge truck obstructions, I think that's something which is a bit beyond the pale. But with regard to my concerns on Dead Man's Lane, I think the answers I got and the amount of detail given from Mr. Goddard, that's allayed my fears slightly. I appreciate equally the residents' concerns. I'm not saying we don't like change, but that is a considerable development right on your doorstep. But my concerns are, I think, if this did go to appeal again on the grounds that was suggested by Councillor Vickers, I think we might not fare too well. Thank you.
I think before we get to the point of hopefully some proposal coming forward, I think it would be appropriate for me from the chair as a ward member to make a few observations as well. And I think tonight we have actually heard a lot of the issues which are obviously tasking the residents and the local community, and also we are looking at the possibility of considerable changes within that area. Now, I know you can argue technically we've got an application we're looking at specifically on the grounds of how it was presented, but things are moving at a rapid pace. My fellow ward member made it quite clear in relationship to the extra generated pedestrians, to the increasing number of pupils at the new primary school, and that is a continuing change. It's not going to stand still. It's going to continually change. And at the end of the day, there is a large number of residents already affected by that very reduced narrow lane. And clearly there's going to be more problems because of the application. So, you know, I'm to a certain extent in the same view as Councillor Abbs. There's a lot of concerns I've got about this application, but I'm also concerned about the consequences if it is actually turned down. So at the end of the day, I think it's trying to address issues which we feel is appropriate to include in any proposal that we're likely to put forward tonight, to make sure that everything is addressed appropriately, and they will address any issues which have come forward during the various different presentations. So, Councillor Hooker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My only thought on that is that if the consideration of one of refusal is possibly on the increased pedestrianisation of school children and what have you, at the moment that's just a presumption. We don't even have a percentage. We don't know how much it's increased over and above. So I think it'd be a bit difficult to make a refusal decision when we've got no statistics. I don't know if Highways have got any comment at this stage, but it's just hypothetical that we've heard it's increased, but we don't know how much by.
Well, it's obviously within my jurisdiction to go back now to the officer, and I mean, I don't know, Paul, whether you would wish to make any observations in relationship to that question.
Chairman, we've absolutely no statistics on pedestrian traffic along Dead Man's Lane, either now or in previous years. And by the way, the recent appeal decision is only a month old.
Okay, I've seen Councillor Gaines, and I'm not certain whether I've missed anybody on Councillor Wollaston and then Councillor Amos-Farage. So I might have got it in the wrong order, so I'm gonna take Councillor Gaines first.
Thank you, Chair. I actually was going to point out that appeal was only a month old. So it's not a question of being a couple of years old. It's actually only a month old. We're only talking about 9 extra houses here. So I understand the concerns about pedestrianisation. But if we do put a condition in place that actually makes sure that path is actually continuous, an extra 9 houses over and above what's already there, I can't see would make a huge difference to the number of children walking along there. If we didn't actually build those 9 houses, it wouldn't make that much difference either way, in my opinion. I do think we need to put something in place, definitely, about the footway. I am a bit concerned about some of the comments that the inspector said, especially paragraph 16, but she said that in regards to the fact there was no parking provision, or not enough parking provision. So I'm fairly relaxed about that. But as I say, I think the biggest thing is if we're talking about extra children walking down that road, they're going to be walking down that road anyway without those 9 extra houses. Thank you, Chair.
Did you wish to make?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point on the issue about the continuous footway. It wouldn't, because it's outside of the red line. It's not something we would be able to condition as part of this application.
Yeah, sorry, I appreciate that.
Okay.
What I meant was we could actually get SIL money to actually get that in place. Because as I was just saying, as I say, those extra 9 houses are going to produce, I don't know, maybe nine extra children. But that doesn't actually stop the other 6 classes that are going to be walking down that road over time.
Well,
Thank you, Jem. I just wonder whether the refuse issue is a bit of a red herring, because it seems to me that any refuse truck would back up into that T-shaped area and deal with half the houses, or just under, without affecting Dead Man's Lane at all. And at the end of the day, we're actually talking about once a week for a maximum of probably 5-10 minutes. I don't think this is a big issue. I really don't.
Okay. Councillor Dick, you were the next one. Sorry. Yeah, I've got you. I've got you. It's okay.
Sorry, Councillor. Thank you, Chairman. I'm very much in support of what Councillor Gaines has said. Some good housing in the middle of the town. Social housing provision as well is so important, and I don't think that's been flagged up properly. I am very concerned about the pathway. I appreciate Ms. Inston said about the red line, but there are other ways of skinning this cat. Provided we skin the cat, then I'm positive.
Members, I've got Councillor Abs and Councillor Amos-Farage. Obviously, it would be nice to get to a point of putting a proposal one way or the other at some stage. So, sorry, are you putting your hand up again, Councillor Wollaston?
I am. I'd like to propose we accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Does that find a seconder? Okay. Councillor Hooker. There's 2 other members wish to speak before I move forward.
Yeah, if it helps, Chair. If it helps, Chair, I was going to talk about if it were to come forward as for approval to make sure there were some conditions. I was simply going to talk about some possible conditions.
Well, Councillor Abs, I think it'd be appropriate that you actually flag up whatever you think is appropriate, because we've had a proposal and a seconder, and I would obviously hope that whatever you put forward will be considered by the proposer and the seconder.
I would hope so too, yeah. Construction was mentioned earlier. I'd like to see that conditioned to come in through the Premier Inn facility, so to relieve as much of the effect as possible during the build. Tree protection added condition. I think Councillor Wollaston mentioned it earlier, that as much as we can, which is allowed, with potentially a covenant, if at all possible, to be placed on people that buy, so they can't go chopping down or letting things grow. Certainly, where I live, we have when it was built, we weren't allowed. It was meant to be open plan. Since so it's because of things like the sightlines and so on and so forth. So if there's anything we can do on there, I'd take officers' advice on wording that might come along with. And it sounds like we can't do the double yellow lines from within this committee, which I would have said 20 mile per hour would be something that we could consider as well to further reduce. But I don't think we can do that. And it seems we can't do an informative. So I suppose I'm down to just those construction and tree protection things that we can do, and maybe some informatives to the parish council, which I happen to be one, so I can listen to myself talking and go, yes, I'll do it.
Happy to accept those, Chairman.
I'm happy to say.
Well, but before I ask Councillor Amathraj if he wants to add some further points, I think councillors in their parish council role, I sure would take consideration regarding petitions on double yellow lines or 20 mile an hour zones, but that's not for us to obviously tonight. So, okay, did you wish to add something to this proposal?
Thank you, Chairman. Not to the actual proposal itself, but I just want to highlight, should we give a quick thought on Councillor Vicker's point, and Councillor Liston point made like that will be a weekly collection of florists. But are we just for my clarification as well as for the committee, are we talking about just the refuse vehicles, or just that vehicles, or is just Amazon delivery lorries or DPD lorries, big lorries coming and blocking the road? So are they just one? And yeah.
Chairman, as I raised this, if I may, as I understand it, and Mr. Goddard may put me right, but the bin lorries are not allowed to operate off private land. So at the moment, because we're not proposing to adopt it, and the access doesn't involve any adopted roads on the site, those bin lorries are going to have to stay on the highway, isn't that right? Yeah. So hypothetically, they might ignore their own insurance regulations and park on that bit of private road, but I don't think we consider they will do that at all. So it will be once a week for 5 to 10 minutes that you are completely stopping all traffic in and out of about 100 homes at the time when there is probably quite a lot of pedestrian traffic again. So we've got a proposal, and I'm probably not going to vote in favour of it, because I think we could defend this decision to refuse on appeal. But let's deal with the proposal that's on the table, Chairman.
Do have a point of information when you're ready.
You want to, Councillor Abs wants to come in, but did you want to finish on another point or not?
Okay, I'll just finish, Chairman. I think I tend to agree with Councillor Vicker's points that we have number of concerns raised, and I've raised, and I although the questions have been answered, but majority of them were not within the purview of this planning application. It could be parish council, or it could be so I'm not entirely convinced that we are looking at an application where it's just about building 9 houses and 2 affordable housing in the middle of some car park or in front of a hotel. So I'm questioning the need for it, or the whole viability, or in terms of this impact to the resident. So I don't think I will support this application in terms of number of conditions have to be put, and I'm not convinced that there is enough provisions for their concerns. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you for those comments. Finally, Councillor Abs, before
just a point of information about waste lorries and parking on private land. That's exactly what happens at Margate, which is in Greenham Parish, which is where I live. When they pick the rubbish up every day, they reverse into the private driveways, pick the rubbish up, and off they go. So I honestly, long as the management company that's established talks to Veolia and the West Berkshire about making sure they know it's all permissible, I think that's a hurdle that will be got over just through practicality. Yeah.
Okay, members, anything finally that we need to ask officers to include in conditions at all that's not been considered? So where are we in regard to the conditions at the moment? That's what you've got listed.
Thank you, Chair. We've got the condition that Councillor Abbs recommended on ensuring that the construction method statement specified that the vehicle should come from the hotel site from the north. I'm going to check with Paul Goddard on this to see whether that would be possible to include that within the CMS, or whether that would be something you would be looking for when the CMS was submitted.
Chairman, yes, I think a line could be included to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other was about tree protection. The standard tree protection condition is more about protecting existing trees during construction. Just want to clarify, are you referring more to the new trees that are being planted and maintaining them? So the landscaping condition does state that any trees, shrubs, plants or hedges that become diseased or seriously damaged within 5 years of completion of the approved scheme shall be replaced. So it's a 5-year period within the condition, which is a standard period that the government recommend on landscaping condition.
I was certainly thinking of the new trees, but the remaining trees as well, but almost having TPAs put on them so that they become protected.
Okay, so we can certainly include a tree protection condition for during construction works for the trees that are to be retained.
It's obviously not my proposal, so.
Yeah, I mean, I just asked to propose in a second. I think we saw nods anyway, but okay. Is that completion of the conditions? So can I therefore put the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Willison, seconded by Councillor Hooker, to the vote? Can you all show your hands? All in favour of that? Okay. Okay, against? And abstentions? Okay. Okay, well, thanks very much for your attendance. I think it would be appropriate to have a 5-minute recess. Okay, members. We're now going to move on to application 23/02536/FUL MAJ, land west of Heath Lane and north of Bowling Green Road. And I'm obviously going to call upon the case officer, in this case, Jake, again, to introduce the application. So over to you, Jake.
Thank you, Chairman. This application seeks permission to vary the previous permission granted by the Eastern Area Planning Committee for the development of a flood alleviation scheme on land to the north of Bowling Green Road. The application is presented to the Western Area Planning Committee for determination, as it is a major application submitted on behalf of West Berkshire Council, and the ward boundaries have changed since the previous permission was granted. The application site comprises the Bowling Green Road flood alleviation scheme, which is accessed from Bowling Green Road to the south. The flood alleviation scheme is located at the southern end of the site here, and the spoil from the works were deposited over land to the north, shown here. A public right-of-way runs along part of the northern boundary of the spoil site here. This application specifically seeks approval to vary the deposition and levelling of spoil on the adjoining land, shown in purple here, together with a new construction of cut-off ditches along the bottom edges of that land here and along on the southern side here. For the previous permission, the overall objective was to reuse most of the excavated material within the site. However, that was dependent on its suitability. The preference was for as much of the spoil to be reused on site or deposited on the adjoining land to reduce vehicle movements. Suitable puddle clay material excavated from this site was also proposed to be stockpiled separately and later used on another separate nearby flood alleviation scheme at Memorial Fields as an impermeable liner for that proposed detention basin. However, subsequent to the previous permission being granted, and following further soil tests and volume calculations, it was concluded that there was not a sufficient volume or quality of material to accommodate the requirements for the Memorial Field flood alleviation scheme. An additional spoil generated from the nearby Heath Lane flood alleviation scheme also needed to be deposited. As a result, a total of 10,600 cubic meters of surplus material was identified to be stored permanently on this site at Bowling Green Road. Therefore, this Section 73A application seeks to vary Condition 2 of the previous permission to alter the previously approved arrangements for spoil to be deposited within the land adjacent to the Bowling Green Road flood alleviation scheme. Whereas the previously approved spoil scheme would have resulted in approximately 5,580 cubic meters spoil to be spread over an area of 18,600 meters squared, increasing the ground level to a depth of approximately 0.5 to 0.3 meters. Permission is now sought for the deposition of approximately 10,600 cubic meters of spoil over a reduced area of 13,900 square meters, but to an increased depth of circa 0.75 meters. The area over which the spoil has been spread has been reduced from the previous approved strategy to allow for new proposed cut-off ditches around the toe of the spoil site, which permission is also sought in this application. As members saw on site, the spreading of the soil on the land adjacent to Bowling Green Road flood alleviation scheme has been completed. In addition, during the consideration of this application, the applicant confirmed that the proposed access track through the application site and associated gated access onto the neighbouring property, shown here, is also to be amended such that the track would terminate at the fence line further south than was previously approved. Plans detailing this change were submitted during the consideration of this application and reconsulted on. However, permission for that change to the proposed access track and gate location has recently been approved under a separate non-material amendment application, as set out in section 2 of the agenda report. As such, that change to the previously approved scheme has already been approved. Here we have a view of the site from Bowling Green Road with the access. Members will just about make out the groundworks of the flood alleviation scheme in the foreground there and the spoil site in the background. And this is the close-up view of the flood alleviation scheme in the foreground here with the spoil site in the background. Here are views of the western and eastern cut-off ditches taken during their construction, not completed. Here is a view from the public right-of-way to the north. Members will note the slightly light-coloured ground in the background, the glimpsed views of the spoil site that can be seen through the trees during winter. And this is one of the few clear views from the public right-of-way of the spoil site area. This slide shows a cross-section at the western end of the spoil site. The existing ground levels are shown as a green dashed line. The previously approved ground profiles are shown as a pink dashed line. And the now proposed ground levels are shown as a solid red line. In general, the proposed new ground levels follow the previously approved form, albeit at a greater depth. As noted in the update report, section AA shown here has been updated since the agenda report was produced due to a minor error in that part of the plan previously submitted. The corrected section AA is shown here, and officers advised in the update report that proposed condition 1 is amended to reflect the corrected plan reference. This slide shows the cross sections at the eastern end of the spoil site with the existing, previously approved and proposed ground levels. Members will note that the ground profile for which approval is now sought is lower in some places than previously approved and higher in others, but all ultimately terminate with the existing ground level at the bottom and the top of the hill. This shows a close-up cross-section of the proposed ground level at one point along the eastern boundary of the western spoil site. Members will note the proposed ground level meets the existing ground level at a point 1.5 metres from the boundary fence. And here we have a cross-section of the cut-off ditch along the bottom edge of both the eastern and western spoil sites. The cut-off ditch is 0.5 metres deep and 1.5 metres wide. Along parts of the eastern cut-off ditch, there are piped sections joined by a cut-off drain sump, as shown in a blue dashed line here. The cut-off ditches are required to ensure that additional sediment and surface water from the spoil sites are collected whilst the grass becomes established on the spoil site. As set out in section 6 of the agenda report, the principle of the development was established under the previous permission. The changes to ground levels from that previously approved, together with the new cut-off ditches, are not readily discernible from the public realm and are not considered to have any significant impact on the landscape or character of the area. Whilst the proposed change in ground levels and introduction of cut-off ditches are visible from neighbouring properties, in particular Hennick Old Farm, those are not considered to have introduced any significant impact upon that previously approved. The works, whilst completed, were controlled by conditions attached to the previous permission, ensuring the protection of trees, biodiversity and archaeology. The application has been reviewed by the lead local flood authority, who raised no objections. The introduction of cut-off ditches would improve upon the scheme previously granted, which did not have such features. As previously advised for the previous scheme, the basin and associated culverts and ditches will be maintained and managed accordingly as they are within the control of West Berkshire Council as the lead local flood authority. In respect of the highway impact, as the works are completed, no highway objections have been raised. Therefore, members are recommended to grant approval subject to the conditions set out in Section 8 of the agenda report and the amended condition detailed in the update report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jake. Paul, any highways issues? I suspect possibly not, but.
Chairman, no, particularly with the fact that more spoil has been retained on the site, so therefore less lorry movements to take the spoil off. So actually this variation has some advantages from a highways point of view with less large vehicle movements. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. We've got an objector, Alistair Lees, who I gather is on Zoom. Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear, Councillor Bartlett. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Do you know the procedure? Because you've got 5 minutes speaking, and if you so wish, we will notify you after 4 minutes.
I'll set a timer as soon as I start talking. That's great. Thank you.
When you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. And first of all, a thank you to everybody on the committee for the visit last Thursday. I'm going to summarise briefly some points made in my letters of the 7th of January and of the 6th of October. Just to give you a bit of context, on the 29th of October 2021, we were assured by the West Berks principal engineer that any soil deposition at the site would not exceed 10 centimetres. That's we were told that's less than is required for the planning permission. When planning permission was outlined, it indicated 15 centimetres to 30 centimetres. And then in June of 23, when the construction was well underway, we inquired, because obviously it was much more significant than that. We were assured by West Berks Council project manager that planning permission would be followed. Obviously, here is the amendment to increase to 0.75 metres. And in reality, it's far greater. I think you could see it on the image that Jake showed on the clear view, as it was called at the time, from the public footpath. I have a view also from my property. I also read with interest the report, and thank you, Jake, for bringing that together. I had a query about 1.3, which was Jake touched on earlier around the stockpiling around memorial fields. I think the officers at the time explained in the planning that it was for 3 sites: East Thatcham, Heath Lane, and Bowling Green Road, which we're talking about tonight. Memorial Fields wasn't part of that planning, so linking the two together, I think there may be some confusion going on there in terms of that piece. In 1.5, it talks about topsoil. There's meant to be 0.6 of clay, 0.15 of topsoil. As members will have seen on site last week, there isn't topsoil on that site yet. It's rocks and debris at the moment. There isn't topsoil. The next point to confirm would be that in the report, I was encouraged to see the landscaping plan was mentioned in condition 2. It mentioned the next growing season. I just wanted to confirm that implies spring of 2025. And just really in closing, just in terms of what I would request, it would be that ensuring that the contours in the plan are respected, that the topsoil, the planting is implemented as per the plans, and finally that the spoil that has recently been generated when the hardcore road that was put into the site that wasn't part of the original planning permission, and the spoil that's generated from that, which has been dumped in the southwest of the site, you saw it on some of the earlier pictures, also that needs to be removed from site. So I'd be grateful if the committee could look at that. And I'd like to thank all the committee and Jake for their diligence in putting together the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Yes, Councillor Abbs.
Yeah, hello again, sir. How are you doing? I may have misheard you, but did you infer that the views that you have say that the 0.75 has been exceeded?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's nowhere near 0.75 in a number of parts, and certainly the pictures taken during the construction illustrate that. So there's a lot more material than 0.75 in there.
Okay, that's something I think we need to come back to later. But thank you.
Thank you. Further questions at all? No. No further questions at this point. Okay. Right, Councillor Dick, are you going to make any observations at all? Ward member?
Sorry, John. No, my fellow.
Were you listening in on the application?
Need some clarification. Can you come up to
This is the agent.
We haven't got you down as speaking, but I would be able to ask any information that a member might feel is appropriate to ask you directly. But unfortunately, we obviously can't get you to speak because you're not registered on the system. Okay, but I would give members the opportunity, if they feel appropriate, to point a question from me directly to you. Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Hooker.
This gentleman is the agent, applicant. What is he, this gentleman? Project manager or?
Might be an agent, Could you come to the lectern and switch it on, Mike?
My name is Brian Carfkey and I'm the agent for West Berkshire Council for this flood alleviation scheme.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, my question is on the site meeting, and I agree with Mr. Lees, there is a requirement that topsoil be put over the clay, and we know the reason of that, to accommodate the landscape requirement, of which I think is wildflowers and what have you. I agree with Mr. Lee that there was rubble and all sorts of detritus, plastic and everything else. I just wanted to ask this gentleman clarification that will be tidied up and we will get topsoil, proper topsoil on there so it does give the seeds a good chance. The other thing we did hear on the site meeting, which you might be able to clear, is that the loading of the seeding was so many grams per square metre, which his consideration, the project manager's consideration, was only half or a third of what it should be. I just wonder, he only does it as a specification, but I just would like to make sure that at the end of the day, whatever we put down's got a good chance and we've given it the right spread to come to a desired finish.
Thank you, Councillor Hooker. Obviously, the questions are via me, but very valid. Yeah.
I think it might be better for the kind of meeting provided to suspend standing.
Right, okay, all right. It's been suggested to formalise the position we suspend standing orders so that there's opportunity for several questions, bearing in mind that it looks of it, well, the hand's going up. So who's proposing? You're proposing?
I'm going to propose, Chairman.
Seconded, Chairman.
Okay, suspension of standard orders as from now. So the questions now is directly to the applicant, in this case, or project manager. So going around the table, I think there were several hands. Right, okay, right. Yeah, wait a minute, Councillor Hooker. There's several questions, and I'm going to begin with Councillor Hooker first because he's already directed his questions. So, Councillor Hooker.
As stated.
Right, in terms of the first question, topsoil, yes, there is topsoil there, but when we were laying out the topsoil, one of the specifications is this meadow wildflower seed. It prefers these more nutrient reduced sort of environments. So the original plan was to put topsoil, and we had started that process to the north. But when we spoke to the landscape architect and the specification, she told us that she preferred the wildflower meadow mix thrives in these nutrient deficient areas. So that's why there's that proposed, or well, that's why it's left like that at the moment. In terms of the defrators, yes, they will be going back and seeding in the springtime of 2025. So all that will be removed. It was too wet during the winter to do that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hey, right, I know Councillor Gaines, you had your, it was just suspension standing orders. Okay, Councillor Abs.
Yes, could you address the question of actual depth?
So when the work was originally being undertaken, there was significant mounds of spoil on site because it was being taken in from the other 3 flood alleviation schemes we were dealing at the same time. However, the actual depth is 0.75. Otherwise, we're not complying with planning. There might be variations in where it goes up and down a little bit, and that's just purely construction. But on the whole, where it starts to slope down, it goes from 0.75 down to 0, where it ties into the existing ground. So there'll be minor variations, but not significant increases. That's just purely construction.
I'm slightly concerned because the profile that we were shown didn't talk about much variable at all in terms of 0.75 was it. So you're now saying that it's in some places it might be a bit more. So
when I say a bit more, we're talking about maybe 100 mil up or down, something like that, in terms of the construction.
Over the 0.75.
Possibly, but that's 4 inches above or down. It is a construction issue, but on average, it's no more than 0.75.
Sure what I think about that.
It's a construction issue.
I'm sorry for not recognising
No,
you, by
that's
the way.
okay. That's okay.
Okay, Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. The gentleman on the screen whom we met, sir, is his observation is that in terms of volume, let's put it that way, a lot more soil, spoil, earth, whatever, has been put on this site than the original application was for. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it is disappointing wherever we go to hear that you were given permission to spread this in a particular way, and because somebody says, oh no, we want it a bit differently, you do it differently. Rules is rules, aren't they?
Well,
thank you.
Yeah, well, the issue is that the reason why we needed to put the extra spoil on was what we were trying to do on another flood irrigation scheme, Memorial Fields. We were trying to use a puddle clay, which is this dense clay, to provide a liner on the other flood alleviation scheme, Memorial Fields. So that would have been a saving to that scheme and a good sustainable solution for that Memorial Fields.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I didn't make myself clear. I understand that, what you're saying there. And of course, flood alleviation is dear to everyone's heart here. Absolutely it is. But it doesn't really matter what happened on another site. You had permission to do X on this site and you haven't done it. Well,
we haven't done it, Councillor, because it would have cost the council money, and this was a more sustainable solution. Because if we were to take that 5,000 cubic meters away from site, it would have to go to landfill. So that would be an extra cost to the council to take that material off site to a landfill, which is not very sustainable, and we'd struggle with the Environment Agency to get approval on that. So it was a sustainable solution to leave that material on site, because originally it was only going to be there for a period of time until we got the Memorial Fields scheme up and running. So in terms of a strategy, it's sustainable.
You take my point though.
Yeah, I do, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
Noted, thank you.
Okay, further questions at all? No, okay, right, well, you can return.
Thank you, Chair.
And from the chair, I'm going to propose we return to standing orders. Can I have a second in that? All in favour? Okay. And return to the ward member. You say you've your fellow ward member has decided she would not present tonight. So the ward members will not be speaking officially.
No, we don't think it's appropriate for us to speak.
Thank you very much. Okay, right, members. Questions to officers. Councillor Abs.
Yeah, I have to come back to Jake, please. This variance on the 0.7, what was built into the model that you were expecting? Because you showed these lovely profiles, and here's the green line and the red line and the pink line and the yellow line and all the, I couldn't actually see all the lines, but what variation was there that was meant to be allowed within this application that, well, you know, we'll have 100 millimeters above what was approved here, but less there? What's the point in a profile if you can just ignore it?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's very difficult. Profiles are just a snapshot, a cross section of one part of a site. We have 4 for each, I guess, arm of the spoiled area: the western parcel and the eastern parcel, and the ground levels had many localized variations. So there are some greater depths, and equally there are some shallower depths. So
I'm struggling though, because we're being asked to approve an application to a certain depth, and it's clear in some places it's far more than that, but to an undefined degree. I'm not heard a single number saying what's the worst case here. Maybe 100 millimeters, but it sounded a bit less than certain.
Chairman, it's. I mean, looking at the scale of the section drawings, you're looking at potentially up to approximately 1 meter in some parts. Seems
Okay, so
seems to be the
250 millimeters then, right.
greatest depth distance. But as I say, those are localized points.
Well, if I may ask in the future that, you know, if there is a variation that we're being asked to accept, that we're told what the variation is, not just given a single number, because, or at least made it very clear that it's an average that we were being given. So thank you very much, but that's at least cleared that front.
Okay, I was allowing you to continue on, but I was looking for a question, but at the end of the day, you know.
Again, the question was, can we have the full detail next time, please, not just an average?
Okay, Councillor Hooker.
I think in anything that's constructed, mechanical or civil, you can't do it to precise measurement. So in future, one might say, well, we'll take it to this depth plus or minus 100 mil. It's got to have a tolerance, and maybe we should put a tolerance on it, plus or minus 100 mil. Yeah, I'm surprised to get it so close on such a large build, to be honest.
Other questions at all, officers? Okay, I keep looking at the clock because obviously it's coming up to 9:45. So if there's no other questions, we will enter the debate. So members, you can open the debate, Councillor Abs.
I'd like to go straight to a decision, to be honest, personally. But this is really seems to best to seek forgiveness rather than permission type approach here, and we very well have approved it all anyway, because to the council's benefit, to this, that, and the other. So I think even the objector on site clearly stated that he was objecting because the rules hadn't been followed, and we absolutely want the rules to be followed when people do planning applications. So for ourselves not to follow the rules it's a bit of a kick in the teeth, but it doesn't change my mind in that even with the evidence that I'm presented, I would definitely approve this application.
So you're putting the proposal to approve?
If you'll allow me,
I certainly will do. Councillor Foot.
Yeah, if I could just quickly say, to me, this is a comms failure, really, that if there's, if we had perhaps mentioned to Mr. Lees what was going on, I don't think we would have a major problem with this. But I mean, the point's been made by Councillor Hooker that, you know, it's an imprecise calculation, so there has to be tolerances. I agree with that, but I think we could do better with our comms. And again, it is a bit of an embarrassment that it's a West Berkshire project, And therefore, I think, we need to take away a learning point from this. And this is that if things change, we owe it to our residents and neighbours to fully inform them. That was my only comment. I would have no objection to this either. So I'd be happy to second the proposal. Thanks.
I think from the chair, the comments you've just made are very valid, Councillor Foot, and I think, outside this meeting, probably we will need to look at situations which could arise of a similar proposal that we're looking at tonight. So hopefully we aren't put in that position as where we are tonight. So we've had a proposal, we've had a seconder. Anything do we need to add to this at all? Okay, sorry.
Could I just very quickly say that I'm happy to support this, but I'd like to think that the planning permission that will be granted this evening probably will be adhered to regardless of what happens on another site.
Exactly, and well, we will consider it at that time. Right, can I have a show of hands then, please? Was that? Yeah, oh, sorry, so it is 100%, I think. Okay, thanks very much, and thank you very much, members and officers for the contribution tonight and support. Do we? Well, all I would say from the chair is that I was just confirming with the officer regarding the applications which are coming forward. There is quite a few. So the next few dates that are already in the diary will more than likely be kept. That's all I would say. And hopefully we can get through ones which are going to be close to coming to determination. Sorry? Have I?
Are we recording?
We're still.
Is he switched? Is he switched off? Did you switch on? Yes, I think he closed the meeting, yeah, before.
No,
Oh, you haven't? Sorry, I thought you had. Okay.